Okay, how's everyone coping? You all good?
Is it enough now? You want to go home, lie down?
Yeah, sort of like nothing better than truth. Truth is what leads to your freedom, leads you to love, leads you to a life of happiness. It's so good. But it's sometimes very confronting, isn't it? Yeah. Truth. Because you start, and this is something that most people need to get used to with regard to truth, is you need to get sort of used to the idea of God's truth you're going to find confronting. And the main reason why is because, the earth itself and all of us who have, lived here on earth, generally we're in the first sphere, which is not a place of a lot of truth. And so when there's these truths, those higher truths are presented to us, for most people it's pretty tough, There's a lot of self-analysis needed, a lot of thinking and feeling about things needed, and that's a normal process, The more you let yourself feel about it and work your way through that, the faster you find your life will change. Yeah. All right. We're at your disposal, another till 4 o'clock. Where should we? We'll go to a woman this time, shall we? So let's come down the front here and then we'll work our way back.
Thanks.
Eddie.
About truth, I have a question. So until I've been in Austria, I'm starting to speak openly to God about how I feel about her.
Yeah.
And often it's not that really nice.
Yeah.
And I found it that it's really helpful to know my history also, because when I share how I feel to God about how I feel about her, then I know it's not about God.
That's right. Right? It's about how you feel about God, obviously.
And things that have happened in your past that you're now putting onto God.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I just wonder if it's the only way to connect to God in a sincere way. Because sometimes I'm like asking to God to come, and but I'm not sure if it's really God who is coming.
Yeah, it's a good question, Julia. It's, what you're doing is right. You need to be sincere about how you truly feel about God. And for most people, that's a pretty difficult thing to come to terms with, because they start realising that, wow, I've got a lot of feelings about God that I never thought I had, right? And never realised were there even. And then after a while you start realising, these are not really about God, they're really about my mum and dad. After a while you realise that as well. And so you start seeing that a lot of the dynamic of your life as a child, so if you think of yourself, so you remember you're half of a soul, your attraction is, I've got to stop telling people.
Male.
Yeah. And so, you've been, when you were a child, when you were just young, you were just feeling like really this half of the soul is really just feeling like mum and dad are my God. So it's sort of like, and the reason why, and a lot of parents like that, actually, they like you as a child feeling like you're their everything. You're their boss. You do things because they said to do them. That kind of thing. Mary was going to say.
No, you're just saying that you're their everything, but you mean they're your everything.
They're your everything. Sorry, yeah, they're your everything, and so they want you to feel that way. So really, in a lot of ways, most parents set themselves up as God to their child. So the problem with that is that you start taking on all their beliefs, all their emotions, all their spiritual beliefs, and even all of their physical things that they do in their life that are normal. If they go on holidays on Christmas, then you go on holidays on Christmas. If they, with emotion, if they feel like, a certain person that is in their community is not a nice person, then you start feeling like they're not a nice person, and so forth. And when it comes to spiritual things, obviously that's quite marked, like whatever they believe. So if they're Christian, you'll probably be a Christian for a while. If they're Buddhist, you'd be a Buddhist for a while. If they're not interested in any religion, then you'll be agnostic. You know what I mean? That a lot of it comes from them. Because fundamentally, for the child, mum and dad are sort of, you could say, a replacement for God. And most parents are not humble in that they don't recognise that the people they brought into the world are not their children. They feel they own their children. So there's some very dark feelings generally that are in families where mum and dad sort of feel like ownership over the child, right? A desire to teach the child what they believe they have learned in life. And obviously what they believe they've learned is severely distorted based upon their experience and based upon how they have either applied or not applied principles. And so in the end, you get all this sort of very dark, sort of, let's draw them in red for that reason, these dark influences upon the child, sensory experience, which then gets filtered into the soul, doesn't it? So it's sort of stored in your soul then. And then, of course, when we talk about God, on the other hand, so here we have God, right? And now you're starting to develop a relationship with God or starting to think about God. Of course, whatever you feel really towards these parents starts to get reflected, firstly, unfortunately, back at God rather than the parents. Because for most of us, we still want the relationship with our parents. We still want a feeling of family. We still want a feeling of, you know, the safety of the family, and they'll look after me and care for me, and, you know, those kind of feelings. We want the family experience to remain. And so anything that mum and dad did that were out of harmony with God's principles, we have a tendency then to start blaming God for them rather than blaming mum and dad for them. Right? Rather than blame, let's call it assigning responsibility to the person who did the damage. Right? Instead, we start assigning responsibility to the person who didn't do the damage. God. Now, that's a natural sort of process. So, but as you talk to God, what will happen is God's not like, you can yell into God and God's not going to go, I'm going to punish you now for yelling at me, right? And you can yell and scream at God and God's not going to go, well, now I'm going to dismiss you for the rest of your life. You're not, you know. If you think about God, he's got ultimate power. He could actually say, I'm going to rub out your soul now because I don't like you anymore. He's not going to do any of that. He loves what he created, no matter how damaged it's gotten from other people. So God will share with you feelings that will help you see that, a lot of this stuff is about someone else. Yeah. And that's a normal process. Now, the more honest with God you can be about what you feel towards God, it will also help you become more honest that these feelings are actually about your childhood and your mum and dad. And actually what's happening in this process, which is a very important thing to realise actually, is that you're swapping over mum and dad from being your God to God being your God. So in other words, instead of mum and dad now, you know, you're treating mum and dad as if their thoughts are God and their feelings are God and their way of life is, you know, the way of life you admire the most and all those things. You disconnect from that, and whatever you were projecting at them starts to go towards God then. Does that make sense? And so you start realising in that process that there's a process of disconnection between you as a child seeing them as God, right? And instead you start seeing God as God, yeah? Now this is a thing that every single person who ever sincerely goes through getting a connection with God will need to go through. So every single Christian, every single Muslim who's ever even had a thought of God before they started this are going to have to go through the same thing, because the reason why that is the case is because they think of God as whatever mum and dad have mirrored God to be. And this is why the Christian faith, if you look at the Christian faith and the Muslim faith, and any faith that believes in one God, in fact, or in the case of Christian, there's three gods in one, isn't there? You know, the triune God they believe in. But God the Father, God the Son and the Holy Ghost is what they believe in. And Muslim one God, Allah. And if you look at their belief systems in terms of the treatment of women and both faiths believe women should be subservient to the man, for example. Now, that happens because most people in that society that accepts the belief have come up to believe dad is superior to mum. There's a feeling in there, and that allows you then to create a spiritual belief that supports what happened in the family. You follow? And so even the people who are already thinking they've got a relationship with God actually have a distorted relationship with God. And they're going to have to go through this process of disconnecting from what the parental religious viewpoint was of God and reconnecting and finding out who God and what God really is in terms of God's nature and character. Yeah. So it's something, if you want to have a relationship with God, it's something that any person who has a relationship with God who wants one is going to have to go through. Every single person, every single celestial spirit has gone through this process. Make sense? So don't feel it's like, oh, it's just me and I'm terrible going through this process. It's a process that's valid and then you're going to have to go through it.
Thank you, yes.
Yeah.
And is it so about self-responsibility? Is it self-responsible to involve my guide in the process?
Yeah, remember your guide. There's often there's two spirits that have been assigned to you. Your guide hasn't really been assigned.
No, your guardian.
Your guardian has been assigned.
Sorry. Yeah.
Your guide is basically dependent upon your desires about spiritual development. So if we look at the two people who can help you spiritually, the primary ones is that you firstly everyone has the guardian, so your half of the soul, has a guardian spirit, and the role of that spirit is to protect you, physically protect your life so that you can live as long as possible on earth, so that you can have as long as possible experience on earth, so that you can learn as many things as you can while you're here. That's the purpose of trying to make that experience as long as possible. So the guardian does that. And so, you might be driving along in a vehicle and you're about to make a wrong turn and there's a car coming past and he's the one who yells at you and says, stop, and you put your foot on the brake and you go, whoa, like I could have run into that person and I didn't, but he's the one who said for you to stop, right? He's that kind of fella or woman, and they will help you live a long life if you listen to them. Many men in particular don't listen, so they do a whole heap of reckless things, and as a result, as you well know, statistically, most men die before women, right, on the planet, and that's one of the reasons why. But the second person is your guide. Now, your guide is a person who only it comes to you, and it's an assignment that God brings to you based upon your desires for spiritual development. So an example of that is, let's say you decide to be a Buddhist. Well, what will happen is you'll be assigned a spirit who will help you be a Buddhist, because that's your desire. Right? It doesn't mean that God agrees with the desire, but because the desire is sincerely, it has to be sincerely established, God responds to the sincere desire saying, well, that's what you want, so I'm going to give you someone who's going to help you do that.
Oh, God's laws really do that.
God's laws do that, yeah. So, of course, when you start to want a true relationship with God and not just a religious relationship with God, then you usually will get a guide who's on the divine love path, and that'll be assigned to you. And over the course of your development on earth, that may be different spirits too. They may, during the first few phases, let's say for many of the young men in the audience we talked about earlier, there's a whole lot of quite dark spirit influence. So sometimes the guide will be just to help you get rid of it, get rid of that influence. And then, because he's a spirit oftentimes who had the same kind of influence on earth, he understands it better than anybody else because he's had to learn about it himself. And so he will often come and he can then, if you're sincere about getting rid of the influence, he can then help you. So this is something that happened to Nicholas in Austria. He developed some sincerity to deal with that, didn't you, Nicholas? And then some spirits came to help him work his way through that, and they've been helping him ever since, and he's felt the benefit of that help, right? So that for a specific purpose. But say Nicholas deals with a spirit influence, and then he decides, I would like to, have more of this kind of relationship with God, or that kind of, I want to experiment with some of my passions. Then he might get a divine love guide who has similar passions to him to help him experiment with those passions. Does that make sense? And he might not be the same spirit who was there before helping him with the spirits, that spirit influence he was under. So this happens to every person. If you're sincere, these things will happen. And so over the course of your life on earth, you may be assigned 3, 4, 5 or 6 or 10 even, depending on what you develop, different people who are helping you. Depending on the skills of the spirit, because not every spirit has the same skills. They're just like you. They have different, passions, desires, skills. It's different experience. So, for example, on earth, in the first century, the only person I've been a guide to on earth was my daughter, Sarah. But I was with her entire life because I had enough skill to help her with every aspect of her life. But if I didn't, then somebody else would have been assigned. And when Mary passed, Mary and me were her guides after she passed. But so sometimes it is a family member from your prior family life who is the guide. But other times it won't be. It just depends on the desires you have. Yeah.
Can I go back to the end of your first question where you were saying, I ask, when I'm talking to God, I ask God to come, but I'm not sure if is God coming,
Yeah.
God's interested in you, absolutely. So God is always interested in you, whether you express a desire or not. But as soon as you express a desire, you become more sensitive to God's feelings for you. Mm. So never doubt that God isn't interested or there. It's just you becoming sensitive and open to feeling God's feelings for you. And also when you ask for that, for God's, you can ask for lots of things from God. God's love is a good thing to ask for, but even God's truth and wisdom and all those things you can ask for. If you have a divine love guide, they will also be attracted to you at those times to help highlight to you, if you're not yet sensitive to God's feelings, to highlight to you what's the next thing, Julie, to look at so that you can establish this relationship with God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one thing that you have been doing, Julie, since Austria, right, when you came there, is that you're starting to focus more attention, aren't you, on God rather than on just everything else in life. And this is very, God loves that, because it's like God can help you with everything else in your life. So when a person focuses on God and is sincere about it, then God always is going to respond. And also, as Mary pointed out, your desire opens up your heart to the response. Mm-hmm. See, before then, a lot of times God's trying to help, and every single person on earth, God is trying to help. He sees every child as his child, and he's trying to help every child. And it's the same in the spirit world. Every spirit who's in a dark place, God's trying to personally help every single child. And so God has the feeling, I want to help every child, but if your heart isn't open to the help, then your will is saying, I don't want any help from you, to God, And so by now talking to God, even though you might be sometimes yelling at God, you're now going, well, I'm now recognising you, and God's going, you beauty, that's a great improvement
I'm in the room,
than before.
yes.
I am around and I'm here. I might not be the image you have of me, is what God feels, but at the end of the day, by engaging the beginnings of the relationship, you will learn that. Yeah, if you're sincere. So God's very happy when a person starts expressing things to God, no matter how warped and damaged because of the parent relationship that might be. And but God wants you also to listen to the answers as well, right?
Yeah.
So that's partially to do with the conscience about how God gives you truth messages, and also God. If you open your heart to receiving the love as well, there'll be times when you go, oh, I know you're not like that, and you have some sincere desire to feel God's love, and under those circumstances, God will give you that love. Initially, for most people, it's sort of like a dribble because we have a fairly closed heart, and then as your heart opens more and more, things change quite a lot, and if you can keep your heart open as possible, obviously things can change quite substantially in a short period of time. It also means, though, that as you receive that love and truth, you're probably going to change things in your life, right? And that's where it gets challenging for most people. Most people start to receive the love, start to have different feelings than they had before, start to have different thoughts than they had before. And then they go, but, wow, it means, if you're in a partnership where the man's abusive, you would want to leave him now, and then you're going to have to deal with some fears you got now and things like that. So there will be changes that happen in your life, but God's not going to force those changes on you. But oftentimes, without making those changes, you can't continue to receive the love until you bring yourself in harmony with the love you've already received. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is something that a lot of people neglect, and because they neglect that, they stop receiving the love. And then for many, many years, sometimes for their entire life, the rest of their life, they don't receive any. Yeah. So don't make the mistake of receiving that love, receiving the truth, and then not taking some action. Make sense? Yeah, don't make that mistake either. We want to receive the love, receive some truth, and then you will feel like, sometimes you feel like, I've got to do something about what I've got now. What do I do? It's going to, and the beauty of the relationship is it does confront many of the injuries you have, so you might be afraid of people, so it's going to confront that. You might be afraid to speak up, well, that's going to confront that. You might be afraid of your husband or your wife, it's going to confront that. You might be afraid of your mum and dad, it's going to confront that. There's all these things that as you receive the love, there'll be confrontations. And you've got to be prepared to take the action that is necessary to stay in harmony with the love if you want to continue growing. So that's the secret to continuing growth.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I add something? I guess I want to make sure that I'm self-responsible with how I process or deal with my emotions.
Yes.
Because I have had the tendency to ask therapists or other people to be next to me when I'm dealing my emotions, and I fear that I do the same with God or spirits.
Yeah. Very good question.
It's a good awareness.
What we find is a lot of people don't have the personal confidence to deal with things themselves. Now, this comes from a lot of injuries from mum and dad basically teaching you that you need somebody else to handle things in your life, right? And a lot of people on earth have that injury, and it's becoming a more and more common injury too. If you look at young children now, they have it at a very young age, that same injury. What God wants you to understand, and this is for everybody, God wants you to understand that He created you with the ability to cope with everything. Everything. You can cope with anything. Mary and I have experienced some very, very hard things in our lives on earth. Both first century and now, and God, if you gain your feelings from God about you, one of the feelings is God created you with the ability to handle everything, right? And once you have some confidence in that yourself, then it's far better for you to engage your own progress than it is to get help from others. And there's a lot you learn by doing that. Now, it doesn't mean that you won't be helped by others, because you've still got your guide and you've still got God and you've still got people who want to help you. But when you become super reliant on their assistance, you're now putting yourself in a place of dependency, and you're also creating a power dynamic where the other person now potentially may take power over you if they're not kind or considerate or in a loving space themselves. So you've got to be very careful that the person who's helping you, if anybody is helping you, that they are loving in the manner that they do it, and they're also not wanting you to become a dependent, right? There are a lot of people who desire to help others who want others to be dependent on them. And that's something you've got to be very careful of in your progress. What God wants for you is to realise that between you and God, everything can be dealt with. You don't need anyone else to deal with anything. However, when loving assistance is given to you, why would you not receive it? Does that make sense? There's plenty of times when you can ask for loving assistance and receive it, and God wants to, and spirits and even people on earth want to help you with that resistance, but the dependency on it is actually something God wants you to break, not establish. So he doesn't want you to become dependent on other people, because if you become dependent on other people, their opinions and their feelings and their beliefs will influence you. You follow me? Yeah. And if their opinions and beliefs and opinions are not God's, then you can see you're going to just replace them, not with God, but with another person you become dependent on, which you almost feel is God. Yeah? And there's a big attraction on earth to gurus, isn't there? Like, oh, I've got a guru, or I've got a, what do they often call them other than a guru? An enlightened leader, or, you know, when we were in Portugal, it was interesting because there was one woman who was considered to be an enlightened leader who came, in the Buddhist faith, came to our presentations, and she brought along with her half of her followers who didn't really even want to be there, but they came because she came. And then also there was a whole group of spirits who were feeding the entire addiction of all of that, who also came with them. And it's very interesting because when you say something that confronts or they feel is treating the person badly, so one of the things I said in Portugal was reincarnation is false. Oh, it's not true. Everybody who had followed that belief was all up in arms immediately. And it's very interesting what happens then, because if you follow a person and you hear a belief that confronts the person you're following's belief, now you've got a choice. Are you going to look at the truth, or are you going to just follow the person still? And if you're getting a lot of addictions from the person, and one addiction might be, I want to feel safe and I want to feel secure and I want to feel like I can handle things with somebody else's help. So that's an addiction. And if you have that addiction with the person and they themselves don't like the truth, then what are you going to do? It's highly likely you will stay listening to the person even though their beliefs are false, rather than accepting God's truth, right? And God knows that God's truth is what sets you free, not staying addicted to a person. So this is where there's a lot of things that go on earth that are very damaging. We see it a lot in general Indian philosophy, Hindu and Buddhist, Indian philosophies, but we see it everywhere. You see in Christianity, you know, everyone becoming dependent upon the minister. Or in the Islamic faith, everyone becoming dependent upon the leader.
Sheikh.
The
sheikh.
Sheikh.
Or sheikh, yeah.
Yeah, Imam. Becoming dependent upon them rather than listening to God. And so if that person has an opinion that differs to God, who are you going to choose to follow now? This gets tricky, doesn't it? Isn't it? And this is where This is why God wants you to realise you can handle everything yourself. You can deal with everything yourself. You can cope with everything yourself. With God's help, you can deal with absolutely anything and find every truth. And you don't really need another person to do it. However, having loving people who help you is fantastic. It is. And every one of you are going to experience that in your future, no matter what your condition. In the spirit world, when you pass, every one of you, no matter what your condition, will get help from someone else. Right? And I've had help from lots of people. In the first century life, I had about 18 guides who were helping me at one point. And every one of them helped me until the point where they couldn't. Does that make sense? And that point for me was when I entered the seventh sphere. From then on, they couldn't really help me much anymore. I had to do that rest myself with my relationship with God, but they helped me up until then. So they helped me do a lot of things. They helped me to understand a lot of things about the spirit world that I didn't know. It helped me understand how to communicate spirits, what kind of spirits I was communicating with. Myself and John the Baptist, we used to talk a lot to spirits, and they helped us work out whether the spirit was dark or not dark, and lots of things they helped me with. They even helped me with, they had been told by God that I would be the Messiah, and they even helped me with that. They helped me come to terms with that. I found it a big struggle to come to terms with that in the first century. And when I say a big struggle, it took me from the age of about 18 to 31 to deal with that. Just that one thing. Yep. And I was pretty sincere about dealing with it, but it was pretty hard because it was just against my whole idea of myself. Not for any other reason than I was looking for someone else to be the Messiah. But it just helped me deal with a lot of things. And they didn't even know what that meant, but they helped me do it. So there's lots of ways that spirits can help you. And if they are loving, that's going to be the measure. Are they loving? Are they trying to take control over my life, or are they just trying to help me with my life? Yeah.
But the awareness that you have a tendency to seek other people to either validate or help you through your emotions, it's a great awareness to have.
Yep.
Obviously, there's reasons why, and it's the reasons why that you'll need humility to let go of, and that'll help you discern what's my guide and what's a spirit who's just trying to help me, who's here because I'm needy, if you like. Yeah. So again, if we go back to that previous suggestion we made before the break, remember to write love up and say what love is and what it isn't. What is love is me becoming dependent on somebody love. You see, if I can see, if I write down what love is not, it is not dependent. Right? So love is self-responsible. Desirous of looking after oneself, loving oneself. So if that's what love is, and then I am choosing to become dependent, then I'm out of harmony with love. So that's not a good thing. That's different, isn't it, than being helped by somebody. So there's plenty of times when I've sought help, and we still do, actually. Mary and I, every couple of days, we have conversations with our spirit friends, and I seek their advice on lots of different things. There's lots of different things that I sort of feel or see happening, and I ask them to help with the confirmation of those particular things. There's also a lot of things where we make plans for the future, and they sometimes help me out with, whether that's wise or not at the moment, things like that. So there's lots of ways you can seek help.
But you never ask them to be here with you to help you to process emotionally something?
I do that far less.
Okay.
Yeah, normally for me, I go, and they know now too that I want to deal with all my stuff myself.
Yeah.
So I don't ask for that now. Back in the beginning, I did a bit, but now no. Now it's sort of, and now they sort of have a hands-off approach to my emotion. They just say, "You got to deal with that. That's it."
And in the end, only you can feel your feelings.
Yeah.
So, spirits can help you by like I was saying before, highlighting, you're skipping this, Julie, or yes, you're on the right track, Julie, but in the end, it's only you who's going to have your feelings. And some people have Spirit's feelings through them because they're so desperate, I need to feel something, and then, they open themselves up in that way. But, you can't a Spirit can't really help you to, even a loving Spirit can't help you to have your feelings, because in the end, they can only give you truth or love, which might help to trigger some feelings, but in the end, they're your feelings.
That's right. Can't help you develop faith, can't help you develop humility. They are qualities you need to develop. Now, I must say, though, many of you will find yourself developing a bit of a sort of a relationship with some spirit friends over time, and then those spirit friends will try to wean you off of them.
Wean you, sorry.
Wean, it's an old word. What does it mean? It
means like when you, like the cow goes away from its mother's udder. So a lot of times it's like a nursing mother breastfeeding her child, right? And sometimes you, the child, get with a spirit friend, get quite connected to them and feel you start needing that. And as soon as a good spirit feels for that from you, he or she will wean you from that. He will say, no, we're not having any of that. You need to stand up on your own 2 feet in this regard. It's sort of like, it's like these women who nurse their child into their, some of them we know, some people we know sort of breastfed their child until they're 5 years old or something. Well, that's stunted the child's growth generally, because it stops the child from learning to look after itself generally. So, our spirit friends are not going to stunt your growth by nursing you when they feel like, no, stand up on your own 2 feet. We need you to stand up on your own 2 feet. We need you to have more confidence in yourself and more confidence in the way God created you to be, which is a self-responsible person who loves. That's what God created you to be.
Thank you.
No worries. Okay, now it'll be another woman. So we've had before. Right up the back, I reckon.
What about?
Sorry, where?
Oh, no, just this lady here who had her hand up at the back of the first section, that's all.
Oh, I didn't see, sorry. Oh, sorry. Yep, fire.
Me?
Yeah, you.
Hi.
What was your name?
Caroline.
Caroline, sorry, Caroline, I can't see you properly.
I think this has been going around in my head, so it may come out completely wrong. But what I was trying to get to is years ago I felt that because I've been abused and sexually abused, so my now understanding is that I've attracted, obviously, abusive men. And
well, just be very... Firstly, I need to stop you there. You've got to be very careful with this understanding. It'd be better...
Sorry, I was meaning, obviously, how you were talking about men this morning. I should have said that, sorry.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I just want to this whole thing that I attracted abusive men, I just want to address that comment first, and then you can continue with your question. Is that all right, Carolyn?
I'm not too sure what that is, but I'll see how it goes. Thank you.
Well, do you want to state your question first and then we'll go back to this point, or?
I think she not quite sure what the question is.
No, I'm not. I'll just finish what I was saying. So I've attracted men in the past, and I couldn't see the behaviour what I was obviously attracting. Yeah. And I felt I'd found my soulmate, and I'm still not too sure. Yeah. And it was a very, very different feeling. It wasn't sexually from, my genital sort of thing. Yeah. It was, my heart opened and it quite shocked me. I'd never felt that. Yeah. And he actually felt the same. Okay. And since that day, I don't think I've had a day where I've not felt something about him. Yep. And ex-boyfriends, I'd always... Within a week, I could have forgotten them and not felt them and not thought about them. And even when I try to forget this feeling, it just whoosh comes back in, and it's like, oh God, it sends me potty.
So is this someone you've known all your life, or?
No, just probably the last 16 years
Okay.
since I wanted to know about soulmates. When I heard you speak for the first time about soulmates,
Yeah.
but I'm not too sure whether that's true. I desired it, but it was more, I can't get him out of my head and my brain, and it drives me bonkers.
Because normally you could be able to get him out of your head if it was somebody else.
Well, it's just body. I can feel him around me, and
Yeah.
I want to understand
is he in spirit or is he on earth? He's on earth?
Yeah, he's on it. Yeah.
Yep.
So it was what? How can I get rid of it?
Why do you want to get rid of the feeling?
I don't really. It's quite beautiful.
Yeah.
It's really, really beautiful. But if it is an addiction, or what I was worried about hearing you this morning is if it's spirits throwing that feeling on me, then I that's so unloving to actually connect with that, because it can't be very nice for him if we're not soulmates, that it feels like a loop. So if I'm getting that projection from a spirit, and then I'm projecting at him, and then I've started to stop it and like, I don't want this feeling. I don't want to do this. I don't want it to go on a loop.
I understand what you're saying.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, but not really. But yeah.
Oh.
No, I understand completely what you're saying. I'm just in terms of answering your question, there's a few things we've got to look at first. Firstly, the issue of being abused. Let's look at that, and also look at dealing with that, shall we say? So let's start there. So your half of the soul has some areas in your past, which you've discussed with me a bit, haven't you? Where you've been sexually abused, right?
I didn't realise it at the time, but then I went into it and realised it when I was a little girl, my dad. But I totally blocked it out, didn't have a clue.
Which most people do.
Yeah.
Yeah, most people do.
This is why I want to talk about it, because probably a lot of people don't know that either, do they? And people just close it down. And
correct.
I've not really heard a lot of talks about sexual abuse at a young age and how to deal with it.
We've talked a lot about it, yeah, because we've had a lot of people we've met who have had different issues of sexual abuse that they've had to deal with.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I was about 40 before I realised that I had.
Yeah, it's a very common thing, of course.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Because there is a lot of sexual injuries on earth, and therefore a lot of abuse is going to happen. And it's more common, obviously, for women than men, but it's still very common. Yep. Okay, so the abuse, what the abuse does, and I don't want to talk about the abuse itself. What I want to do is talk about what it does to you. Does that make sense? So what it does to you with regard to your relationship with the gender of the person who abused you. So like if a woman had abused you, then these feelings would be probably towards women and yourself. If a man's abused you, there'll be feelings towards the man and yourself in relation to men, right? So depending on the gender of the abuse, of the abuser, you will have created, through the process of getting abused, you will have created inside of your soul some feelings, right? In the relationship with how you see yourself. So firstly, it's how you see yourself. And also then how you see that gender. So in this case, men, it was a man?
Yes.
Yes. I know it's a man, I was just saying. It's a man, yes.
Yes.
And so the how you feel about men generally is going to be influenced by this abuse. Now, it depends, doesn't it, on how you react to the feelings that were generated from the abuse, the grief. So this abuse has caused grief, and then it depends on how you react to the grief as to what you will then do. So if you react to the grief by getting sort of angry about it, trying to, you're afraid of feeling it, so you get into a state of anger. So there's obviously an intermediate stage in there of fear. But if you get into a state of anger, then you might feel very angry with men all the time, right? But that hasn't been your pattern, has it?
No, I've been very quiet because I've not got angry. I've got angry internally. And
Correct. So there's a second thing where this anger is actually at yourself.
yes,
And blame of yourself. Now,
not understanding things, getting confused, not
Yep.
knowing who to trust.
Yep. Now, this blame of self in all these different areas causes the blame of self is the thing that causes the attraction, you follow me, to certain types of men who are prone to blame you rather than themselves, right? So it's not actually the abuse that has caused the attraction. It's not like we're saying, I've been abused and now I'm going to attract more abuse. That's not how it works. What happens a lot is the women who have been abused frequently, they start blaming, all their anger is upon self. Now, the problem with dumping a lot of anger on self is that it opens up the ability for people who are also angry with women to take their anger out on you because you're already angry with yourself. Does that make sense to you?
Totally, that's what I'm attracting right now. Yeah.
That's right.
And we could say attracted to.
You're attracted to it, even.
it. Yeah.
Because you're blaming yourself.
past.
You think that it's normal to blame you.
Which
so
is
when
what I've always had. People have done that, so I didn't know any different, and they made me believe. And that's what you were talking about early this morning, isn't it? That's what happens. You believe that you're wrong, that you've been abused, but actually it's the abuser that's doing wrong. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
And what he's doing is he's taking advantage of the fact that you're going to blame yourself for how he treats you. He's taking advantage of that, right? So that shows you his bad condition, his dark bad condition, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Rather than your own. Your own is in a state of blaming yourself. And then he says, right, this woman's blaming herself, so I can get away with a lot with this woman. I can treat her badly emotionally, I can treat her badly sexually, I can demand things from her, I can make her feel bad about herself, and she'll just keep blaming herself and give me what I want, which is power and control over her and other things like that, sex maybe too, and she gives me all the things I want, right? And so it's the tendency to blame yourself, which is a lack of love of self, which causes them to be attracted to you. Right?
Yeah.
So you're right with that so far?
And God didn't design the law that once you're abused, that you just get abused forever.
No.
Until you feel it.
It's not like that at all.
That's not God's intention. That's not God's desire. So it's just very important that we understand God's law does not want you to be harmed, whether it's sexually, physically, verbally. Yeah.
Anyway at all. However, what happens if you look at the general condition of the world, most people in the world take advantage of others when they can. Isn't that true?
Yeah.
There's very few people on earth who recognise they could take advantage of you and don't. Right? Because most people are in a poor condition of love. They recognise they can take advantage of you and they do. Right? And that demonstrates their poor condition of love. So these men who take advantage of your blame of self are in a very poor condition of love, and therefore they are attracted to you blaming yourself. You follow me?
Yeah.
Yep. Now, in the process of this occurring, those men, let's draw them, I'll draw them as well. Of course, they are connected to their own soul, you could say, their own half of the soul. But you can also see, it's not, I just got to be careful of how I draw the men, perhaps.
It's anatomically correct.
Anatomically correct. So male. So this is them, and they obviously have an injury where they're prepared It's a dark injury, so therefore I'm going to draw it in this sort of red colour. They're prepared to blame the women for a lot of things, which means that they've grown up with a mother who's blamed herself for a lot of things, and also given them the feeling that they shouldn't blame themselves for anything, right? And so those men are going to be attracted to your life because the anger that you feel about what happened to you is focused on yourself. Like you're saying to yourself, I'm to blame for it. And in fact, these kind of men who abuse women also do believe that you are to blame for it as well. They will even say that. Abusers often say to the children they abuse, oh, that's because you wanted that. You wanted this. You know, they say things like that. And these kind of men as adults often say the same thing, but you like that. You like me being a bit rough with you. You know, you like us having fights, and you like us, you know, you like me being a bit bossy with you and being sexually demanding with you. That turns you on. And to some degree it sort of does, because the injury in the soul is to blame yourself. And so when somebody else blames you, it opens you up emotionally and also energetically to their projections. And so you can even get sexually aroused by somebody blaming you, which is unfortunate, but it's just a part of that injury. So, if you don't deal with your blame of self, which I need to say your attractions are showing you still feel this way, aren't they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So your attractions are still showing you that you do have this tendency to blame yourself. And this is why I latched onto the words as well, because the words, even the words a person uses, frequently show that the feeling still exists, right? So there's this tendency to blame oneself within you, saying, I attracted it, like I'm to blame for it. Like, no, all you're responsible for is the fact that you haven't felt your grief about it yet. And that's caused you to have this angry suppression of your grief and to use blame as a way of suppressing your grief. If you blame yourself, you can see the dynamic. If you psychologically blame yourself for what happened, then you don't have to grieve what happened. And this kind of grief is quite gut-wrenching kind of grief. And so you can store that grief rather than feeling it if you blame yourself, right? So this is why often we desire to blame ourselves. And then on top of that, the men who abuse you want to blame you for it as well. So there's an extra motivation to blame yourself as well. And so it's very common for most people who've been abused to blame themselves for the abuse. Now, the problem with that is that this grief hasn't gone, and I've still got a strong desire to blame myself for what happened to me. So what kind of man's going to be attracted to me or attractive to me? This is something you don't want to face.
Somebody that's not, that won't treat me nicely.
Yeah. If you look at your history, you can see that's true.
Abandon me and not be there and say that they love me and I'm your soulmate, but then obviously actions don't follow the words, which is what I'm kind of...
Now, if the man is even your soulmate, can you see that unless you heal this, you're not going to know, because you're already in a state of attracting a man who's going to take advantage of your blame of self. Unless you get to this grief and stop blaming yourself at all for the abuse, can you see you're going to be feeling more attracted to a man who blames you, and you're going to be more emotionally open to the man who blames you unless you feel this grief. Now, if this man is your soulmate, as you claim, the one that you've known about...
I don't know. Yes, you're right. I do claim he is my soulmate.
Correct, you do.
I do claim it. I say it all the time, but
exactly.
Then I'm not being humble.
Okay.
I'm not being humble in what, like you said yesterday, I'm not humble to know whether I'm right or wrong, and that's my problem.
Well, you do feel you're right. So, because
Doesn't
otherwise,
mean I am right.
because otherwise you wouldn't say it, right? So you do feel he is, but while you have this, you are going to be very prone to attracting men who want to blame you. And they might even say they love you and care about, just like an abuser would, by the way. You think about a lot of abuse happens not violently, but I love you and this is why I'm touching your private bits type of thing. You know, I'm just pleasuring you. That kind of thing that a lot of these guys say to their victims, right? In a way, they're saying the same to you and then blaming you for not having the relationship or, you know, sorting out the relationship. But again, the detraction is to this desire you have to blame yourself. Now, that is all avoidance of this big grief. The desire to blame yourself is an avoidance of the grief. You will only grieve when you understand the truth, which is you're not to blame. And once you start feeling you're not to blame, then you'll have something to cry about. Once you believe you're to blame, you are switching off your grief.
I felt very blamed for a lot of things for a long time, really. And coming here these last few days is
we haven't seen each other for a while, have we? And
no, and so that's great. Thank you you for coming, and thank you for that for yesterday. It was really amazing
it's our
for me.
pleasure, Carolyn.
Thank you.
Can I just finish this here? So what I'm saying to you, though, is that the person you're thinking is your soulmate, even if he is your soulmate, he is obviously attracted to you blaming yourself. And that's a problem. Because it doesn't matter whether he's your soulmate or not. If he's attracted to you blaming yourself, then whatever relationship you may set up with him, it's damaged from the beginning.
Yeah.
Yep. And can you see, unless you get rid of the grief that causes the anger to blame yourself, unless you get rid of that grief, and also work through why you want to get angry with yourself rather than feel that grief, which is all about your fear of how big that grief is.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Unless you deal with that, then whether he's your soulmate or not, you're going to be attracting a man who's going to have a strong tendency to blame you. Now, if he turns out to be your soulmate, can you see that's going to cause you a lot of damage, right? If you allow him to have a relationship with you without you dealing with this, it's going to cause you a lot of damage because he's going to start blaming you for things in your relationship, and you're going to take on that blame. And if he is your soulmate, you're going to be more open to taking on that blame from him than anybody else. And that's going to make your life very hard.
It's been very hard since I've last seen you. It's been very hard. I've lost everything. Yeah.
So it's very important that forget about him for a moment. So I'm saying forget about your soulmate if he is your soulmate for a moment, which I know sounds a bit confronting. Because this is your dynamic, and unless you deal with that dynamic, any relationship you have with him is going to be tainted.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And the problem with that is you're not going to be truthful with him because you're blaming yourself. When he is to blame, you're not going to be truthful with him about him being to blame for something, for some irresponsible, unloving thing he did. And that's going to cause you to enter this dynamic that even if he is your soulmate, you're going to have a very bad relationship with him. Now, of course, he could choose to deal with that feeling, couldn't he? But I'm saying this to you because you can't control what he does.
No, I can't.
You're not going to be able to control him for the rest of your existence, even though he's your soulmate. A lot of people think, I get my soulmate in my life and I'll be able to get good control of him. And that's not the way it is at all, as anybody who's met their soulmate will tell you. So what needs to happen is he needs to sort himself out too as to why he's attracted to this. Now, to you blaming yourself. Now, the man you're talking about has no awareness of himself in this regard. None at all. He
doesn't even believe in personal development. So
correct.
He doesn't.
Is he going to do this?
No.
No. He's not going to do it unless you deal with it yourself, and then whenever he tries to interact with you, you'll be able to know this is why. You'll be able to be direct with him. He's not going to do it in his current state. Now, one day in the future, that might change through all sorts of things, because God's trying to lead him to truth just as much as he's trying to lead you to it.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, he's in a very shut down state in terms of taking personal responsibility for his life. And so the reality is that he's probably unlikely going to do it, very soon, unless you make this change. And then, if he is your soulmate, he'll feel pretty confronted by the change. You follow me?
Yeah.
If he is your soulmate. If he's not your soulmate, he won't be bothered by it at all.
And you'll know.
And you'll know.
You'll know he's not your soulmate when you
deal with this.
The reality is you can't know who your soulmate is while you've got that still in you. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
what could you just go back and explain that why in previous ex-boyfriends I would forget about them within a week or 10 days, but this feeling won't shift and it won't go. And if the law of attraction will bring me his initials or a smell or something, it's constant and it can be really ramped up.
You're not
Is
in a
that
relationship
spirit?
with him?
Pardon?
Are you in a relationship with him?
No, I haven't spoken to him for 3 years, 4 years, something like that.
Yep.
So,
why would you think that might be happening?
well, I'm just questioning. I would convince myself before I came here today, oh, he's my soulmate. I get this feeling from him. Oh, it's just wonderful. It drives me mad. But in reality, when I listen to what you've said today, is it spirits just pumping me with the feelings to keep away from the grief?
Well, yeah, if you look at this dynamic of what you're trying to achieve, which is blaming yourself to avoid your grief, right? That's what you're trying to achieve, to avoid this big grief, because it's painful, right? Trying to avoid that. And the spirits know that while you blame yourself, they can arrange your life so that men like this are attracted to you.
Or you're attracted to
Or you're
them.
attracted to them. And they can set up sexual liaisons for you to go with the kind of men that they feel themselves to be. And if they give you those particular feelings, that all they've got to do is say, he's your soulmate, he's your soulmate, he's your soulmate, and give you feelings of openness towards them. You say you feel him around you all the time. This man isn't feeling at all. Is he? Is he feeling at all?
It was quite interesting because when we first met, he actually said, what are you feeling? And I would say he's the most person that's talked about feelings, but he's obviously not, because otherwise... So...
What are these true spirits? If these spirits are around you, what are they trying to do?
They're trying to make me still stay in the same dynamic.
Yeah.
But for me, it felt like an antenna I had got. I had an antenna on my head, and I was always like this. I was probably looking for the one. And then when I met him, it's like it fell off, and I don't have any attraction to anybody else.
You were looking for someone to help you with your grief, which is not the same as looking for the one.
Okay.
You're looking for someone to help you with your grief.
Okay.
Now, people want to take advantage of that. You blame yourself for what happened, and it helps you avoid your grief. But the blame of self means that spirits can come along and help you blame yourself for a lot of things, which you do, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you understand this dynamic, but you're not understanding what it attracts. Carolyn.
Say that again, last word.
You sort of get what I've just explained here.
Yeah.
But you don't get what it attracts. What does it attract? You blaming yourself, what does it attract?
I'm assuming it's spirits because it isn't a physical person, because I don't allow any other man in.
I'm saying physical or spiritual, I don't care. What does it attract? What kind of person?
a not very loving person, kind person, abusive person.
Yes, that's what it attracts.
Yeah,
Yep. So that would apply whether they're spirits or people,
yeah,
would it not?
yes,
Okay. So if you are disconnected from God yourself, and if you're not, practicing principles yourself and not morally connected to those principles yourself, which to a large degree over the last 15 years you
haven't,
not
no,
been,
I agree, yeah.
right? Then, of course, that this particular dynamic that's occurring in yourself is going to attract people who want to abuse you spiritually. How do they do that? They get you in a dynamic with somebody on earth where you blame yourself more.
But actually, this is quite tricky because you're not having the interaction with the man. He's still a fantasy at this point. You haven't actually spent time with him in a relationship. So that, for these spirits, that's kind of handy. Because if you think about all your ex-boyfriends, you got to sleep with them, you got to live with them, and then you're like, oh, now, see ya. That's why you didn't think of them afterwards. But this guy, he's still like an idea yet to come in the future. And
That you can stay in an imaginary place with and open yourself to sexual energy coming from these spirits, a sexual exchange with those spirits.
And it's interestingly, in the last month or 6 weeks, I've actually kind of thought, no, I don't want that sexual projection at me. I felt that.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether it was about the time I was thinking of coming to see you again, but I just thought, no.
This guy's not aware of sexual projection at you at all. So where's the sexual projection coming from?
He describes it that he felt I was his soulmate when he met.
Yeah.
He's married and he won't leave and he doesn't want to leave.
Yeah.
But 3 years ago he said he would leave and he would deal with things, what he needs to do, and come.
Which he hasn't done.
And I felt him all around me. I felt that. But I'm now questioning, my question was, is that...
I don't know if you want the answer yet, Caroline.
No, because
Okay.
it's quite obvious what,
I think
from
we've
what
answered
I've described
you.
what the answer is.
Yeah, I think we've answered you, but you're a bit caught up in the story of it and not interested in the truth
Yeah.
yet. Yeah.
No matter whether he's your soulmate or not, what I'm saying is that's not the person you're feeling.
No,
You're feeling the spirits who are giving you sexual feelings, and you're having sexual feelings thinking it's him or his spirit
Right.
or his soul.
I can feel
and you're
the
actually
truth on
sharing
that.
it with them.
Yeah, and that's why I felt to stop in the last 6, and that's why I was getting annoyed with it, because I was feeling it didn't feel right. It didn't feel...
Yeah,
Correct.
but now you're still just in the story.
So now stop your story.
Yep.
So Mary, continue saying what you
Well,
want to say.
I think Jesus said it, yeah. Just that you're in a dynamic with spirits who are trying to get you to keep in this fantasy about this guy.
So
because
that
it
you keep
opens
giving them
you-
sexual energy in the guise of them being this guy.
Yeah, yeah. And when you're around him, that in the past they might have gone, oh yeah, have some feelings also for Caroline.
And he is the kind of guy who will also do the same thing as these spirits.
Yeah.
He is the kind of guy who's he's married, but he's sharing sexual energy with you when he sees you. So that's off, right? Yep. So he's a very poor moral condition. Yep. But he's also doing the same thing as these spirits, taking advantage of you and taking advantage of the feelings he gets from you when he's with you. But when he's not with you, he can't feel you at all.
Yeah.
It's only when he's with you that he feels you.
He says he could, but obviously maybe
Well, they
that's
obviously can't. Why is that obvious? Why should that be obvious to you? Wouldn't he feel the pain he's putting his other half through by doing this? Wouldn't he? Wouldn't he also feel, if he actually felt, wouldn't he also feel the pain that he's putting his marriage through by doing this?
Yeah, he has spoken about he does feel grief and shame, but he's obviously not. He feels it, but he's not feeling it. If that makes sense.
No. He's describing feelings to you, so you keep on the hook and
thank you.
keep feeling the same things. Whether he's your soulmate or not is immaterial at this point, because at the end of the day, unless you deal with this and unless you deal with this going on, you know, you're not going to be able to really feel what's going on for him, right? But it's also stopping you from having a relationship. These spirits obviously want you for themselves. So they want you to not have a relationship with anybody else, right? They want all of your sexual energy. See, some spirits come along and they want to share in sexual energy with a group of people. And then other spirits come along who have a strong sense of ownership, a strong sense of demand of control, which is exactly what blaming yourself gives them. And they want you totally. They want all of your sexual energy for themselves, right? Because they don't have that for themselves. So the trouble with the spirit who's doing this with you is that all he's doing, he is a he, right? And all he's doing is causing you to stay in an imaginary place so that you allow this energy to keep flowing and you keep giving him the same energy so that he feels good about himself. And while that continues to happen, how can you know this man is your soulmate? All he's got to do is just tell you that he is. He's an unavailable man, emotionally unavailable, sexually unavailable, and it's in the interest of this spirit to keep you on the hook about that, because while this spirit here, male, while this spirit here keeps you in that hook, you are going to be open to any sexual energy coming from him and to him. You're going to give him sexual energy while he keeps you in this hook that you believe he is him. You follow?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That answers it. Thank you. That's yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And it all starts because of not dealing with this grief, and that attracts this kind of abusive male spirit who goes, I can take it. He's abusing you sexually.
So thank you. So it's working on going into the deep grief, looking at the principles of the higher things.
Dealing with that grief.
Yeah. And
which you've been very frightened of dealing with your whole life, right?
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
And then obviously building up my self-worth to kind of...
it'll happen naturally.
Will it? Okay.
Yeah,
just by
Carolyn,
the grief going, it would happen.
Once you deal
naturally.
with this grief, there's no reason to blame yourself anymore.
Okay.
The purpose of the blame itself is to stop yourself from feeling grief. So once you feel the grief, there's no reason to blame yourself anymore. Once you stop blaming yourself, these kind of men will find it more and more and more difficult to connect with you. And as a result, you'll be able to tell, is this a real connection or is this actually just a connection based upon my blame of self?
Thank you. That's giving me hope. Thank you.
Yeah. A lot of talking in that from you.
I know, sorry.
And not a lot of listening.
No.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing the recording so then I can really keep playing what you've said to me.
Yeah, well, you might have to blank out a lot of your words to hear mine.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
I'm just joking.
Why do I do that?
Well, you're afraid. You're afraid of dealing with this. And really you want a different story. You want a different answer. You want me to say, he is your soulmate, go for it.
No,
Break up the
relationship.
Yeah, you do. Let's get honest with it. You do want to say, here's your soulmate, go for it, trust your feelings, go for it, break up the relationship, take some proactive action so that his marriage breaks up or whatever, which I can't do, of course, because it would be unloving. But if you're honest with yourself...
Feels yucky now.
Sorry?
It feels yucky now.
Yeah, well, it's starting to feel yucky, but this has been going on how many years?
16.
That's a long time before it felt yucky, right? Yep.
And also your big panic, Caroline, is about the grief. So every time we bring you back to the grief, you
want to go off
more.
on another tangent.
Yeah.
You
Thank
understand?
you. Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yep. Good-o. Mary's choice now.
Let's come to this lady at the corner back here. I can't see your name tag. Yep, you. Yep.
Angharad.
What was your name, sorry?
Angharad? Yeah.
Say it again.
Angharad.
Angharad?
Angharad.
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 Very unusual name.
Yeah.
Yeah, how do you put up with it?
Yeah. I've got a lot of variations of it.
I bet you have. Yeah.
In
And a few
Australia, you
nicknames.
wouldn't last 5 minutes and shorten it to something.
No, shorten it to something.
It does
yeah.
get shortened to Harry, sometimes Anna, but Harry, yeah.
Yeah.
Is it a name you chose or that it was given to you at birth?
It was given to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a Welsh name.
A Welsh name.
Yeah. Well, they're not very loving parents.
Well,
Not just joking.
Joke.
it has had its ups and downs.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah.
At least if you don't meet very often people with the same name.
Yeah,
They're
of
like,
course,
you're the
yeah.
one with the weird name.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay, Ang Herod. What would you like to talk about?
So it was a little bit in relation to the question back that this lady over here said.
Juliet, down the
Julie.
front? Or-
Yeah.
Yep. Good.
In kind of looking outside of self for not necessarily to God.
Yeah.
So I lean quite heavily into my dreams and sleep state.
Yeah.
So now I'm really wondering what's going on there. So because I remember most of what goes on
In your
at
sleep
night.
state?
Yeah.
Yep.
And sometimes it's just bonkers and all these places I go. Often it's really helpful. I
Yeah.
get quite a lot of information.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's really unpleasant.
Yeah.
So I kind of lean into that.
Yeah.
But now I'm like, what's happening? So from spirit influence or what's my attraction
Yeah.
in that? Is it trustworthy?
And I'm a bit confused how it applies to the principles so far. Have you examined the principles yourself?
Well, I feel a bit confused about that, of like how it's...
What principles are involved in terms of...
and relating to God.
Yep.
Like, I thought that I could trust my dreams as some external...
Okay.
do you see what I mean?
Sort of
So-
like
Source of
guidance.
truth.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
my spirit guides,
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
guidance that's
Yep.
coming, and I can trust that.
Yep.
And now I'm like, oh, is this just my shit? Really, actually, I can't, it's not trustworthy.
Well, yeah. Firstly, let's answer that a number of different ways, perhaps. But the first way is let's look at your life. How many hours are there a day? How many hours do you sleep?
8,
How many hours are left over?
the rest.
Not a person who likes mathematics. Okay. So yes, so we have 16 hours of the day. How much is that in terms of percentage? We're sleeping 8 out of 24,
So
which
I couldn't
is...
do 24 take 8. You know you want percentages.
Not on the spotlight either. I'm like,
And we are awake 16 out of 24, which is 2/3 of my life, which is basically saying 33%, is it? And let's call it rounded up, 67% of my life I'm awake. Right? So now God designed your life that way. Right? That's why, for the most part, almost wherever you live on earth, and of course that's not always true with different seasons, but for the most part you'll get anywhere from 12 to 16 hours of daylight, and you'll get 8 to 12 hours of night for this reason. So God designed it so your body clock works in such a way that you will be forced to sleep. And the reason why God designed it that way is there's two things that happen in your sleep. So in your sleep, there's two things that happen. There's the regen of your physical body. Right, that's number one. And the second thing that happens is the education relating to your education about spirit life. Let's call it of future life, because that's where you'll be in the end, right? Those two things that happen. So you're receiving regen of your physical body, and then there's education of your future life going on when you're asleep. Yep. So that's the purpose of those 8 hours. And where's the rest of your time? Here. So obviously God feels, for anybody who's living on earth, that there's more education to receive here on earth than there is to receive here in the spirit world while you're asleep for the benefit of your life. So God designed it purposefully this way to allow for you to have a period of time where you're regenerating this physical body, because the physical body can't cope with being awake 24/7 for weeks on end. And the education of your future life occurs here. So these two things are occurring in those 8 hours. And then in these 16 hours, that's your primary education. Your primary education. All right?
Yeah.
Already you can sort of see where I'm going with this, right?
I can.
Yeah. So here I am. I have my 1/3 of life, my 33%. So this is yourself. And then I'm going, that's telling me everything. Now already you can see that's not truth, because God designed a system where this should tell you most things and this leads you to the next things, not the other way around. You follow me?
Yeah.
So the persons who focus mostly on their spirit life, the very first thing they're doing is avoiding their physical life.
Okay.
Right, you know you're doing that,
Yeah.
right?
I can hold my hands up to that.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So you know you're avoiding your physical life by sort of going, oh, I've got this amazing spirit life and I'm remembering lots of it now, and there's more and more motivation to remember more and more of it, of course. And also you call them your dreams and your experiences. Now, some of the things you think are your experiences are your dreams, and some of the things you think are your dreams are your experiences, ironically. So there's a bit of a mix-up in terms of what's really happening versus what. Some of the things that are happening are to help you see you're avoiding a lot of things in your physical life. So the purpose of dreams is your own self in your spirit form bothering you in your physical form, saying, you need to deal with some things, man. You know, that's the sort of, that's the feeling, right? So you in your spirit form are seeing some things that you don't like happening in your life on earth, that you choose to avoid while you're in your life on earth, right? Now, let's look at all of this from a principled perspective. Firstly, there's the truth that that's only 33% of my life. The truth is you may be here a bit while longer, right? How old are you now?
47.
Yeah. And how long could you live?
Well, I suppose 100.
Yeah. How long has your mum and dad and their other ones lived?
Well, my dad not long. My mum's still going. So.
Yeah, how old is
But
she?
I suppose about Gran was 90.
90, yeah. So you're halfway. And of that halfway...
You see the look. It's like, oh,
She
is
goes,
it over yet?
You can see the feeling, right? The feeling is, I want to go sooner. That life's better. That's your feeling, right? Yeah. And of course that may eventually even cause your death, by the way.
Yeah.
Because you have that desire. But the desire is driven by the desire to avoid your physical life.
Yeah.
Now, if we look at the issues of principles, let's look at the principle of truth. Right? So number one truth is, I want to avoid my physical life. Avoid is what I want. That's what I want to do. Avoid. That's not. Is that right?
O-I-D.
Avoid. I want to avoid my physical life. Right? Why would I want to avoid my physical life?
Because it's painful.
Well, so that's now a point of humility.
Yeah.
I don't want to feel pain. I don't want to also, what else is another reason why you want to avoid it? If you felt the pain and you didn't want to continue the pain, what would you have to do?
Change.
Yeah,
take
you'd have to change your life.
Make decisions.
You'd have to take an action in harmony with love, which you're avoiding, of love of self actually.
Yeah.
You'd have to take an action in harmony with love, which you're avoiding doing. You follow?
Yeah.
By having this stuff go on in the spirit, in your sleep time, you get to avoid the truth about your life, you get to avoid the pain of your life, and you get to avoid taking action in harmony with love of self while you're in this life. And actually you're working towards, from an emotional perspective, you're working towards wanting to die out of this life. To not be here anymore. You follow?
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is actually almost like suicide,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Just because you want to avoid the pain,
Yeah.
the grief, and you don't want to take actions to love yourself. Now, obviously, you're very afraid of taking those actions. Otherwise, you wouldn't want to live most of your life here, right? So there's a benefit to your life there. Which are these benefits? But God's trying to encourage you to go, if you pass into the spirit world while you want to avoid truth and you want to avoid pain, what do you think your spirit life's going to be like?
Not much fun.
Not much fun, because all of God's laws in the spirit world say don't avoid pain and don't avoid truth. So you will be in quite severe disharmony with those principles when you pass. And people who are in severe disharmony with the principle, where do they go? Into the first sphere, in the hells of the first sphere generally. And is that going to be pleasant? It's not going to be as pleasant as you think, right? If you do that. It's going to be very much the same and perhaps a bit worse than your current life. Right?
Ironically, in the state that you're in of avoiding your kind of lived existence on earth now, ironically, and seeking the spirit life or the sleep state experiences, ironically, if you pass in this state, you're very likely to become earthbound to do exactly the same thing. Avoid your spirit life by trying to have experiences in the other,
direction.
in the other direction. So that would be an irony, wouldn't it, if you avoid your whole life on earth and then you end up
and you
back
die
here
because
on
of that
earth.
avoidance.
Yeah.
I know. Well, that's something I hadn't considered.
Exactly. But you can see the truth of the spirit world is the truth. The spirit world is more definite about you not avoiding.
Yeah.
It forces. See, here on earth, to a degree, you can have a level of comfort. Here in England, you can have a level of comfort, can't you? You can get the food you want, and you can get the drinks you want, and you can plan your life around avoiding most of the pain that you have by doing things, or going on excursions and all sorts of things you can do here. You won't be able to do that there. Whatever your pain is, you're going to be confronted with it there.
And I'm realising as you're saying that, so I get that, because I witnessed that when my dad died and him then experiencing all of his pain. So I really know that's a truth. And I think I thought, well, it's going to be easier because I can't avoid it there. And so that somehow...
no, you can avoid it there by becoming earthbound.
Yeah, it never occurred to me that you could avoid it there.
In fact, a good 20 billion of spirits currently on earth are all earthbound because of the same reason. They want to avoid their spirit life. Yeah.
Okay.
The trouble with avoiding pain is that it causes you to avoid it wherever you go.
Yeah.
So when you go to the spirit world, you're going to continue avoiding it.
Okay.
Right? And from God's perspective, this is how God feels about you. He's going, don't die. Deal with this problem of changing why you're in pain before you die. Right? Because if you don't deal with it here, it's going to be harder for you to deal with it there. Not only that, you're going to experience the pain of a different environment on top of it being hard. You follow?
Yeah.
An environment that you can't escape. You can't go to the beach when you want to. You can't go, to the movies when you want to. You can't watch telly to zone out when you want to. You can't go and have a coffee or tea you can't do those things because you're going to be really focused on the pain and trying to avoid it. That's all you'll be focused on doing. In fact, if you're not careful when you pass, it will become a frenzy to avoid the pain. Becomes a frenzy for many, and that's why they become earthbound for many years. frenzy.
It's sort of like at the moment your sleeping hours are like a drug in a way, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're a drug trying to help you. You're trying to
They're an acceptable drug.
medicate yourself with this sort of stuff to avoid what's happening in your awake state. But, the thing about pain is that the more you avoid it, it just increases. And also you
Increases
develop...
your fear of it too, by the way.
Yes, you develop these habits and beliefs that you continually telling yourself, I can't deal with my pain, it's too much to deal with, there'll never be a good outcome if I deal with pain.
Yeah.
But as soon as you start dealing with your pain, even if it's not all gone, your life starts to get better. Your life on earth starts to get better. So you you've got a lot of happy life potential on earth,
And also your spirit life will be much happier if you deal with it now.
Yeah, way more happy.
Way happier.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've seen many people do this avoidance here only to experience extreme pain there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's not the kind of pain there you can get out of as easy.
Noted.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had friends who have died from cancer, for example, and they're in more pain now than they've ever been on earth. And they died a painful death, but they're still in more pain than they had on earth because they're still avoiding the emotions that caused the problem. And so, this is a truth about the spirit world that most people ignore and almost all New Age circles deny as well. And this is why a lot of people are attracted to New Age beliefs, because it helps them either, I've got pain here, or go there and I won't have pain anymore. Yeah. The majority of people, when they pass in the spirit world, that's the time that's the most painful.
Okay. Thank you.
So you're better off dealing with your pain here than there.
And not getting stuck.
Sorry?
Yeah, and
Not getting stuck here.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't have any problem with you having a nice experience when you're asleep. That's all good. No problem with that. But the purpose of it
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
And-
not in harmony with God's principles.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. That's
Yep.
really helpful.
What you might find is the more you decide to deal with your life on earth, the less exciting your sleep state will be.
Yeah.
Less, but your life on earth will get better. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah. And not only that, you're learning lessons while you're here about desire, dealing with pain, that you can handle it, that you can deal with anything. You'll have more confidence in yourself as a result. You'll have more confidence about making decisions in life. You won't be driven by as much fear. And all of these things will benefit your spirit life.
Yeah.
So this is why God wants you to learn it here rather than there.
And you're obviously very mediumistic.
Yep,
Like this
obviously.
is part of being quite mediumistic, is having this ability. And I don't know about you, but sometimes when I'm denying stuff in my life, my dreams, and I wake up exhausted because
Yeah.
it's been a big night, you know.
I mean, it's
Like-
hours and hours of
Yes,
eventful, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
lots of stuff going on and
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
lots of things to
So you
look at.
don't wake
and
up rested.
No.
You don't wake up rested,
No.
and then it's harder to get through. So you're in this cycle of like, oh, can I get to sleep? Oh, but sleep isn't restful, and now I've got to do life, and I don't want to deal with life, so I'll go back to sleep. And so, actually, you can turn this thing around and use your powers for good, mediumistic powers for good.
For your own sake.
In your
First.
awake state.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Makes sense, Sandra.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Your choice again.
Mary's pick. Who we got? Let's go back to, is it Sarah, Hannah? Yes, you. Yep. Laura. I knew it ended in an R. Yeah.
Hello. Okay. Feeling a little bit fear, but over the last couple of days when I've been attending these talks, I've come to an awareness that when I engage with people, I don't have a sincere desire to love them. I feel like most of my engagements, I'm trying to get something from somebody, or
Yep.
it feels a little bit codependent. And so last night I was trying to feel what principles might be engaging in that, and I feel like it could be something to do with not feeling like I've got anything to give. So
Yeah, you could say, couldn't you, that So,
It's really about a love principle, isn't it?
well, there's a number of principles involved, isn't there? But let's look firstly. So I'll just write Laura, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, Laura. So this is Laura. So notice I haven't drawn her as a just because it takes too much space now. So I need more space.
Yeah.
So Laura, you're basically saying that one of the emotions inside of you is that when I'm dealing with others, I'm basically looking for things from them rather than giving things to them. Now, you can see that there might be a number of reasons why you want things from people. Firstly, it could be what you said, couldn't it? Which is the thing you'd like it to be.
Yeah.
Can I say?
We usually
Which
start
is?
with the thing we like it to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Low self-worth.
No self-love.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Now, how does no self-love, according to your assessment, cause you to not be interested in other people?
For me, it feels like I've got nothing to give. It feels like a fear that I've got nothing to provide somebody else with.
So nothing to give. Yeah. Why do you feel that there's nothing to give? Keep going. What was demanded of you in your childhood? You can feel that, can't you? Like, what was demanded of you in your childhood? You want me to speak for you? Because I can feel what you feel, so. But it's sometimes good for a person to say things, yeah? It's all right, yeah. Can you feel the pain of that? It's like, there was a lot demanded from you in your childhood, right? Yeah. So the reason why you feel there's nothing to give is not because you have low self-worth. It's because you were demanded from in your childhood. Right? In other words, parents sucking the life out of you. Environment sucking the life out of you. Got to give till you're exhausted, can't bear anymore. And it feels to me too, you sort of had a feeling of like, if I could just read or just have a bit of private time to myself, or I could just, just have a moment of peace. So seeking escapes, to get a moment of peace in your childhood. So you're saying it's no self-love, but I'm saying it's because of the demands from childhood, you feel you have nothing to give. And that's not related to self-love, actually. That's related to the fact you're now angry about that. So I'm very angry. You get angry about the demand, right? The demand from a childhood gets you to feel like, I don't want to give anymore. I am sick of giving to people. I don't want to be in this position where people are demanding, and of course the attraction is going to be more and more people demand things from you. Yeah. Right, any person, and so you end up sort of almost being a recluse.
Yeah,
like you shut yourself down and try to stay away from people and try to be alone a lot, and you just to get some peace, just to get some feeling of control over the fact that there was all this demanded from you.
Yeah. And you also tend in this state to not want more friendships. I don't want more relation. I don't want more, because every time I get another friendship or something, I feel like, I've got to give
more.
and I don't want to give anymore. So
and unfortunately, because of the way the law of attraction works, which is fortunate in a way, every person you interact with is going to demand more from you.
Okay.
So because it's there to trigger the feeling you have, so you feel the grief, right? So that's the attraction is going to be there. But you're in an angry state. Now, in an angry state, It's like, I am sick of this. I do not want to do this anymore. So in an angry state, what is the person going to choose to do? It's like, I don't want to be interested in you. I don't want to listen to you. I don't want to have to hear your life, and I don't want to have to hear what problems you face, and I don't want to have to... I just want to be left alone. Leave me the F alone.
Or if we're interacting, you give me something. Yeah.
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 Does that make sense? Yeah. Yep. Now, if we look at the principles now in terms of how to solve the problem, can you see it starts with a lack of humility about this? You're not letting yourself grieve that this was your childhood. You can see even me just saying it to you caused grief to come up, right? And yet, so the grief is right there. It's right there. It's like you're so close to it. And yet the angry is sort of keeping your grief under control because you don't want to feel this from your childhood. Now, if you go through this, which is really a point of humility, you have to face, you have to be humble enough to go through that. And then in the pace of that, you're going to also have to face the truth that that is true. That is what happened to you. You follow? Nobody in your life is telling you that.
Yeah.
Like everybody in your life saying, give me more, give me more, give me more. Nobody's going, you've been demanded of a lot, haven't you? Right? Nobody is... I'm probably the first person who said it to you, right?
You are, yeah.
Yeah? And so you have to face the truth. And this is where it's handy with God, you see. If you had a conscience open, God should say, Laura, your childhood was bad. And see, unfortunately on earth, a lot of people go, well, it wasn't that bad. You know, like there was no major thing that went on and there was no major abuse or there wasn't any major thing. But the trouble is when a child has been sucked from and drawn from emotionally all of their childhood, there is some pretty severe damage that causes the child. And in particular, there's this feeling of exhaustion that develops in the child without the ability to grieve it.
Yeah.
Right? Because the persons around you don't want you to grieve it. If you grieved it, you'd want to stop doing it, and they don't want you to stop doing it. So they want you to not grieve it either. And so the demand in your childhood gets to an adult. When you've got an adult and you can become an adult and you can make some choices, you can go, you beauty, now I'm an adult. I can divorce everybody from my life as much as possible now. I've got some level of control. As long as I have a job, of course they're sucking from me too, but as long as I have a job and do the least amount I can do to have a private, personal, like reclusive life, right, then I can control this feeling.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can control this feeling somehow. So basically it's anger controlling you from ever getting into humility and facing the truth that this is the truth of your childhood. Now, if that grief of being demanded from all your childhood is let go, right, then you'll no longer be angry. Now, what does that mean? That to you, that means if somebody comes along and starts sucking from me just like they did in my childhood, I'll go back and do the same thing again. That's what it means to you. In other words, you don't see any point letting go of your anger. You feel your anger with the whole thing is protective. You feel you're protecting yourself from ever having this happen to you again. You follow?
I think so.
Yeah?
Sorry.
So your anger, not only you think is helping you now, but you also think it's helping you for your future. And this is why there's no interest in other people, why you feel that you don't really care. So it's very good that you had that awareness over the last few days. Very good, because it's helping you see, I am being unloving to other people. So this is very good to see by keeping them all away from me as much as I possibly can, you know. And this then causes you to ask a question, why do I do that? You know, and you started focusing, interestingly, on no love of self, which is really diversion from the reality of your childhood. Because, and this is something that we see a lot of people do. Something happened in their childhood that's bad. It feels very sad, feels a lot of sorrow inside of a person because of that thing. So what they would rather do than feel the sorrow is create another reason why they're sad. And in this case, you're saying you lack love of self, right? Now, it's not the lack of love of self that is the problem that caused this problem. It was the lack of love of you from others that caused this problem. It was completely the opposite thing that caused this problem. Now, of course, in the way you're dealing with it, there is a lack of love of self. Because obviously, if you keep staying angry, this feeling will stay inside of you. You'll become more and more of a recluse driven by the anger. And in the end, you'll end up being a lonely old woman who dies and nobody remembers her. Does that make sense? Which won't be good for you, because you'll enter the spirit world as a lonely old woman who also wants to be a recluse, right? And then you'll stay reclusive there. And we've seen people stay reclusive for hundreds of years in the spirit world until they've recognised they have some pain to deal with from their childhood.
Yeah, with this this grief that you're holding on to, Laura, it really shuts your heart down from love, which is why it shuts you down from receiving love, because your association in childhood with being
loved.
being, quote unquote loved, is really being demanded from. And so you sort of shut off from people loving you. But then, as you can feel, you also shut off from loving others as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so your definition of love from your childhood is, if I love someone, they would take from me.
And I must give.
I must give. I don't have my own life if I love somebody else. I don't have me if I love somebody else. I don't experience me. These are all things that are now, because of your experience, now what you believe love is.
Yeah.
Yep. And unless that grief is felt, you will retain these beliefs and take them to your grave.
How do I go about challenging that belief?
The quickest way is to feel your grief. That's how those beliefs will leave you.
Like, all I had to do was say the truth to you and you started crying. All you've got to do is repeat that truth to you until you finish crying. And you just keep doing that until you finish crying.
Okay.
You follow? Yep. And then you'll start feeling about all the effects of it. And you'll probably want to cry about them too. And I don't blame you, because they're terrible effects. So you don't know yourself well as a result of it. Your view of love is that you try to reject it, keep it away from yourself. That means you haven't experienced much love in your life at all up to this point. It also means that every relationship you've had has been tainted by it, because you just feel like, oh, I don't want the relationship. Or everyone just keeps sucking from me and demanding things of me all the time. And so you're not experiencing what are the potential joys of having a good relationship, because all you feel is just a series of bad ones. Make sense?
Yeah, understand.
Yeah. So truth first. Have to face truth first. Truth is, you were demanded from your childhood. This is causing a lot of trouble from you while you store that grief. That's the truth. And if you can feel that grief, be humble to it. So this is about pray to God to recognise the truth every day. People have been taken from me all my life. This is how has it harmed me? How has it affected me? And then be humble enough to feel what God tells you about it, feel about what is said. Just let yourself have some good cries about it, Some decent cries, like what you felt just now was minor compared to what you need to feel about it. You need to just let yourself have some gut-wrenching cries, like just really let yourself feel it. And as you do, these feelings will be relieved. And as those feelings are relieved, your anger will dissipate. As your anger dissipates, your desire to understand or know people will change. And for the first time, you'll also be able to select nice people to have relationships with who don't take from you, who want to give to you instead, who want to have an equal relationship with you, not a demanding one. you'll attract that as well if you deal with this. But you see, at the moment, your reality is not that, right? So this is your reality. I have to, people keep taking, I must give, I can't be me. This is the reality that you have come to believe is true because this happened to you in your childhood. Yeah?
Okay. Thank you for that.
Okay. Did you want to ask anything else?
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
No? You good? No worries.
Okay.
All right. What's our time?
One more, is
Yeah.
it? Okay.
Probably maybe one more question and then so Mary.
Mary's choice. What if we come to Mikey?
Just going to quickly grab some notes that I've made. My question was about, the question itself is, if we're so corrupted by selfishness, how do we transition to obeying law without selfish desire being the motivation? And I had a few thoughts about it, and I ran them through a couple of the principles, just briefly looking last night. So a couple of the thoughts I had were, and you talked about these yesterday, but I still feel stubborn about this. So I feel like you gave a lot of information about it, but I still was like, I'm not sure about this. You talked about spiritual beliefs that we have. So within the principles of spiritual beliefs or the spiritual principles encompassing selfishness, like hierarchical principles.
Yeah.
So some of these are incorrect. Wanting superiority, for example, and not equality. The idea that
Let's go back to the original problem, can we, before you read the rest off? Because it's very good analysis, but
very good.
I want to just step by step through it a bit.
Yeah, of course.
For the sake of our audience keeping up with you.
Sometimes I want to go a bit quicker.
Because you're already a long way ahead.
Well,
so,
and you had a good think about it, so then
you've had a good think about it, which is great, and we want to just share a bit with you about it.
Cool.
So you're raising the issue of if I am selfish, and as you correctly say, if I am selfish, so I should have first put your name on the board, maybe like I did with Laura, which is?
Mikey.
Mikey. Spelt?
Key. Yeah.
All right, so if I am selfish, then you can see my motivation to do most things is going to be selfish. That makes sense, doesn't it, to everyone? Like, if I've just got fundamentally a desire to either have pleasure or to avoid my own pain and to have my own pleasure. So let's define selfish. I want pleasure at any cost. I want to avoid
Jesus, getting tired.
Pain
at
any cost. So that, for most people, that's the definition of pleasure. That's how to have a good life. You have pleasure at any cost and you avoid pain at any cost. Then you end up with a good life. But that's actually a selfish life.
A selfish life.
Yeah.
Do you agree that that's the definition of selfish, Mikey?
I would feel so. I feel for myself like I'm more on the sins of omission side of things currently. Like I really don't speak up when I probably should, and I want to avoid. Like,
so you do a lot of avoidance?
I think so. Yeah. You know, when you had the line drawn yesterday, and this on the right and that on the left, and I'm thinking very much. I feel like a lot of my real heavy sins of commission, I've probably dealt with the chunk of that, and then
in the terms of.
Just like a lot of sexual addictions, or like I was very much like sex, drugs, rock and roll was kind of like my favourite sort of like set of addictions around that with music, etc. So I feel like a lot of that I've managed to really rein in. Some of it's still
That's
there.
That's your physical ones, but you certainly have other sins.
But also you've reined it in through control, but not necessarily through dealing with emotions.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
You understand?
Yeah.
So yes, I agree you have reined it in, and quite significantly actually, right? But you still do have a lot of the desires to do those things.
Definitely. Yeah.
So we need to make sure, and this applies to everybody, make sure when you're looking at a problem that that you don't think you've solved a problem just by controlling your behaviour. You solve a problem when you've finished dealing with the emotion. That's when you solve a problem. So controlling your behaviour is helpful, and it helps you get more in line with the principles in terms of behaviour, but it's not helping the emotion be more in line with principle.
No.
And remember, the emotion and the beliefs are what are driving the actions in your future. So very important to understand that I've got to address the emotional beliefs inside of me in order to make a substantial change on any issue.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's important to remember. But yes, so you used to be like this, really, you could say.
Yeah,
I
was
pleasure at any
terrible.
cost.
Yeah.
And you've sort of tried to rein all that in because you realise that it's causing problems, right, in your life and other people's lives too. So you've reined that in. You've attempted to control that, but still not dealt with the emotional reasons why you wanted it. But now you've got it under some level of control. And also in the process of getting it under some level of control, you used a very strong will to do that. And as a result, dropped off a lot of spirits who were influencing you to do those things too, by the way. So it wasn't a bad thing to do. I'm just saying, the spirits dropped off because they know you're not going to do it again or do the same things to the same intensity again.
I feel quite strongly about change. Yeah.
Correct. And as a result of that, developed quite strong will to change. The spirits have sort of gone, well, it's pointless hanging around Mike anymore to get all those things from him. We're back off as well, and that's actually alleviated a lot of the spirit pressure on you to do those things, which is great, right? But the emotion's still not addressed. Yep, so that's something we've got to go back to. Okay, but yes, you're right. Here you're now in the process of avoiding pain at any cost. Still. Yep, go on. So that is a sin of commission. That's a sin of omission, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yep.
So I was then looking at the desire principles, and you were talking to Tim yesterday about the idea of how we reject God's opinion if it basically doesn't agree with our own.
Yeah.
And this idea of desiring ignorance. So that was another thing that I was sort of running this through as a principled question.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking about transformation principles.
Yeah.
And the idea that, is it possible I'm selfish because I also don't easily receive love from God and my heart is closed to more love? Would it be possible that through not feeling what love feels like, I'm then not able to understand how to give love in a selfless way?
Yeah, not only possible, very probable, right? If you think about it, because obviously if you've never experienced love, you're going to end up with an addiction to experience other things in place of love. And this is where most people enter their addictions. It's sort of like, I want my addiction because the real thing's not working. I've never had the real thing. And so you then start going, I never had the real thing, so what I really need is a substitute for the real thing.
Which is instinctual, right? Because I was then thinking like...
if it was instinctual, there wouldn't be laws governing sin about it.
Sorry, I meant instinctual as in our conditioning. It's not from self-awareness. It's like an instinct of, I want to avoid pain as this is what I've been taught to do.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't call it instinctual.
Okay.
In fact, by calling it instinctual, you're saying really that God put in you an instinct to do this, and that's not true.
I didn't mean like from God's... I see what you're saying. I agree with that.
I know what you mean.
And what we're picking up on in you is that there's this emotion in you about avoiding personal responsibility for the things that you are choosing to do in addiction.
Okay.
Yeah. And and that's not instinctual.
No.
God never placed your what's it called? Predilection? Is that the right word?
Predilection, you mean?
Predilection.
It's a very...
Which means...
Tendency
the tendency towards. God never put the tendency towards that in you.
Okay, I've misunderstood something because I was looking at one of the... I forget what you call them. The
outlines.
Outlines, yes.
And it was looking at the human will principles, and one of the bullet points was have desires from self-awareness rather than instinct.
Yes.
Yes, you do. But they're not... The instinct is...
All of the instincts God placed in you were always loving.
Yeah.
And so you're saying, instinct means that I have this instinct to avoid pain. No.
I was thinking of it as like my
Correct.
addictional instinct to just
No.
be in that kind of...
Correct.
Right.
When we say by instinct, what we mean is there's an instinct on earth, for example. An example of that is instinct causes you to go through puberty.
Oh, right, okay.
Right? So it's
I
a
never thought of
natural
it like that.
process that causes you to go through puberty that God has designed. And it's an instinctual design of the soul to trigger the bodies into puberty through the process of puberty and in the process of becoming an adult. And
Sure.
the reason why that's instinctual is because it gets you to realise you have a mate and then start to look for your soulmate
Okay.
and everything.
I'm starting to see how I've misunderstood this now.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So you've got to be careful sometimes. There's a often misunderstanding of words because we have the desire to think of it a different way rather than...
Right, which
Yeah.
is kind of the bit I said a second ago where I'm like, my desires are to ignore what God thinks and to think about what I'm thinking about.
Correct, yeah.
All right, so should we just go to the question, which is, if I'm very selfish, but I hear that I need to live in harmony with God's laws to be happy.
Yeah, so now my conscience starts bothering me.
But
I'm going,
how do
wow, I'm pretty selfish and I'd really like to get all of these, selfish desires met. And this is how it starts to feel after a while, doesn't it? So like, I don't really want to hear all this truth, but I'm hearing it now and I can't unhear it now. And now it's like it's now bothering me, and I sort of feel like upset. I better put my hair back. It's starting to bother me.
I haven't got any hair left, so...
Yeah. And I won't have soon if I keep doing that. But it's sort of like it bothers me, my conscience now, because I've heard a truth, now it bothers me. It goes, okay, yeah, if I look at my life, I'm not really helping other people. I don't really have a desire to help. I don't really have a desire to even know other people really. I just have a desire to get pleasure, which was where you were before. And then you work through that because obviously your conscience bothered you about that, right? And then, now, my conscience bothered me about this other thing. Now I'm trying to avoid pain and I'm trying to get people to meet my addictions to avoid my pain, and that's all pretty hard, and that's starting to bother me too now. It's sort of like, what can I do now to actually have pleasure? Because God designed you to have joy and pleasure. He did. And God designed you to also feel pain, by the way. Because if he didn't design you to feel pain, then whenever you had it, you wouldn't be able to feel it. It wouldn't be very good. So he designed you to feel pain and also pleasure. And he designed a universe to be focused towards bringing you pleasure. Like God wants to give you the gift of having pleasure in your life. That's what God wants, but not at any cost.
And isn't your question really, well, if I know this now, that in order to have true lasting pleasure, I have to live in harmony with God's law.
Yeah.
And there's a very definite line. But I already know I'm selfish. How do I live, if I just live in harmony with God's law just for a selfish desire, just to have more pleasure, then how does that work? Is that the
it feels like a
question?
Chinese finger trap. I'm kind of going like, how do I get out of this? If I'm selfish already and I'm looking at them going, they sound good, but am I just wanting those selfishly? Probably.
Well, firstly, is it selfish to want pleasure, or is it selfish to want pleasure at any cost?
Okay.
Which one is selfish?
The second one, I think if it's at any cost, because then you'd probably just bulldoze anyone to your own free will if it's
Correct.
for what you want.
So isn't it, if I want pleasure, I would want pleasure for me, and I'd also want it for you, wouldn't I?
Yeah.
So, and that's not selfish if I want it for you as much as I want it for me. So it's not the seeking of pleasure that's selfish, it's this desire to seek pleasure for me and not for you.
Yeah, which now you've said that, I am very mixed up about this concept because my mum is very much a pleasure at any cost at the expense of myself.
Correct.
Whilst telling me she's loving me, and it's very...
Yeah.
I'm very
confusing.
angry about selfishness because it's very confusing and it's not kind at all. It's quite wicked, really.
Yeah, that's right. It is wicked. But if I love you, I will want not only pleasure for me, but pleasure for you. I want you to enjoy whatever we go to do. Let's say, I don't know, here's an example. We're going down the beach. Or maybe that's not so common in England. Although,
Yeah,
you know,
it is. Yeah,
yeah,
I'm
it's
from
pretty
Scarborough. I'm from a seaside
Summertime.
town, so the beach
Summertime.
means a lot to me. I love it.
Yeah,
I go to the beach with you.
yeah, down in Bournemouth where we're staying, we walk along the beach every night and there's like hundreds of little tiny huts where everybody's out there until like we're walking past at 9:30 at night and they're still out there having their barbecues and everything, obviously enjoying the beach, right? So
Yeah.
let's say we want the pleasure of going down the beach and enjoying some recreational time. If you don't enjoy it and I'm with you, I won't force you to come with me. Because that would be, I want your pleasure as much as I want my own. So I'm happy to do it by myself without your participation. But if you do participate, I would love you to enjoy it as much as I do. So I would try to, do you like boogie boarding and there's a bit of waves, then let's go boogie boarding.
Right.
If, I'll think, and even if I like surfing on a board and you like boogie boarding, I'll do boogie boarding with you because I'm enjoying boogie boarding just as much. And
Okay,
I'm
so you're still enjoying
your
it in that
company.
situation. It's not like you're sacrificing what you want to do.
Correct. So if I really hated boogie boarding, I wouldn't do it. But if I enjoy it and you love it, and I'm interested in your pleasure as much as mine, then I'll probably do it with you. Right? I wouldn't worry that I can go surfboarding another time when I'm not with you.
Yeah, you see, I've not experienced much of that in my life, so that's kind of an alien concept to me.
That's right. So what I'm suggesting is the desire for pleasure, God desired to create a universe to give you pleasure. Right? So this part of that equation, God's happy with.
Okay.
But he's not happy with this part of it. Right? That's out of harmony with lots of principles. Right? Out of harmony with love, out of harmony with truth, out of harmony with responsibility, caring for others. If you look at the issues of love in particular, it's out of harmony with so many issues of understanding people and caring for people. Equality and all sorts of things, because we're actually putting people down in order for us to have pleasure. We're making their lives miserable so I can be happy, which is what your mum did with you, right? So obviously very bad. So it's the at any cost that's the problem with the pleasure. Make sense?
It does make sense. Can
Yep.
I ask about the self-responsibility aspect of
Sure,
that as well?
sure.
I'm wondering how, because I feel like within that I want pleasure, I still feel like there's a twisted kind of inside-out guilt about that, which
Yep.
then drives it at any cost because I'm almost angry that I'm not getting pleasure, I'm not allowed pleasure, so then I go and get it in ways that it's sinful, essentially.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, if you seek pleasure in a loving manner, because God wants you to want pleasure, but in harmony with love of self and others.
And
Right.
really what you're describing is that you're avoiding pain in the seeking. You were saying, I was not allowed pleasure, so now I'm getting my pleasure. You're avoiding the pain of I was not allowed
Okay,
pleasure.
and is that where I'm being not self-responsible in
Yes.
avoiding the pain and then
Yes.
saying, well, I didn't have this, so I can kind of go out and do whatever I want, and that's my
Correct.
justification. I'm not being
Yes.
responsible.
Yeah.
Correct.
It's the avoidance of pain which is the demonstration of a lack of self-responsibility.
Okay.
Because that is inside of you now, and only you can feel it. And if you avoid it, you're going to purposefully and mistakenly harm others with it.
Yeah, and get a lot of influence to do so.
Of
and-
course,
yeah.
by other people who feel the same way. Yes,
Yeah.
of course,
Yeah.
right? So this part is very unloving. It's also not humble. You follow? The principle of humility is not being adhered to there. It's like I've got to learn how to feel my pain rather than visit my pain on others. Right? A lot of the earthbound spirits, the reason why they're earthbound is they're visiting their pain on others. And of course that's going to result in more pain for them, but also pain for the people they're visiting upon. Right? And you don't want to do that because that's where a lot of your sin happens, where you're avoiding pain. So there's no harm in seeking pleasure as long as it's not at the cost of other people or the environment or sacrificing any of God's laws. And this whole process of avoiding pain, whether it's at any cost or any reason, is wrong.
Thank you. I understand that's the way out the finger trap, is that pleasure's okay. It's just the way that I'm doing it is not.
Yeah, you're using pleasure to avoid pain.
Yeah,
and
I am.
many people are doing this. You know, an example of that is video gaming. Very common thing amongst young fellas, in particular nowadays. Very competitive as well, by the way, and often money involved and all sorts of things. But a lot of it is they're living a life in a game rather than living their actual life. And that is indicative of the fact they're avoiding a lot of pain in their life, their physical life, by immersing themselves in an imaginary life. Yeah? And that's an example of avoiding pain, which is sinful. So most video gaming is sinful because most people are doing it for that reason. Yeah? So just taking away your video games too now, guys. Yesterday it was toilet paper, now it's video games.
You can keep the 0-0 draws as well, by the way. We don't like them either.
Yeah, I know, but you don't, yeah. But it's
football,
funny
but
that
no.
you'll watch them for 90 minutes. Anyway, that's a different matter. So yes, it's... and in fact, even the games, I must say, and I joke about it, but the fact is that men like to just watch a spectacle in order to avoid their pain. That's why most men are there. They're avoiding pain with their fathers, right? In particular, competition with other males. And so they go to watch a competition that they're immersed in for 90 minutes that has no result. And they're immersed in it for 90 minutes and they're full of emotion about it and everything else, which is actually the emotion that they probably need to feel about their dads, you know, for the most part. And they are immersed in the competition of it because they've fundamentally, inside of themselves, feel like they are competing with dad and it's not working very well. And so now they want to exorcise those painful demons in a game that somebody else is playing and they go to watch.
Good to know.
Yeah. So it's an example of avoiding pain when you go to something that is basically a fundamental, like if there was a result, there'd at least be a reason for being there.
There is, though.
Wouldn't there? How do you design a game when you're highly competitive? Why design a game where there's no result?
But there is a result.
No,
You have
there
a league
isn't.
table, the draws are a valid result, and if it's a knockout competition,
There
you
he
get
goes,
extra time
explaining
and,
away the injury. Right?
There is, though.
There he
is.
goes. Yeah. So can you see, if you were really competitive and you were thinking about it properly and you weren't just immersed in this spectacle to avoid your pain, you would go, this isn't a very good game unless there's a result. So let's make sure there's a result.
Okay.
Wouldn't you?
I'll think about it.
Penalty shootout, doesn't work. Another penalty shootout, doesn't work. Another penalty shootout until it works. Then we get a result. Do you know what I mean? At least there's a result. A person who's just watching the spectacle to avoid pain doesn't care if there's a result, actually. Doesn't actually care. Because inside of themselves, they're just there for the spectacle. They're there to avoid their pain. And this is why you see the whole grandstands of men avoiding their pain. And when there's a 0-0 draw, half of them want to riot. Or when there's a referee indecision, half of them want to riot, you know, because there's so much pain. So much feelings of competitions with their dads that haven't been dealt and addressed with. And so they like that. And this is why a lot of sports on earth are brutal. Like, you know, you look at American gridiron or something, or Australian rules football or other things like that. They're just physical, body-on-body, brutal, where they get injuries and even death, you know, just for the spectacle, because men have this strong tendency to avoid their pain, particularly with their fathers, and want to visit it on each other instead.
Okay.
Yeah? And so these competition-based emotions are an example of avoiding pain at any cost, thinking that there's a lot of pleasure in the spectacle when actually all there is actually is quite a lot of pain in the spectacle. Yeah, that is being avoided. Yeah. So this whole system is created to, obviously, when you say, yes, at the beginning, yes, most people are motivated selfishly. They want pleasure at any cost and avoid their pain at any cost. Conscience bothers you. Great. It's good that your conscience bothers you about these matters because nothing's going to change unless it bothers you. And then you start looking at it, but you can see that this becomes quite a problem, this avoiding pain at any cost, or avoiding pain at all, actually, becomes a big problem because that's going to cause you to do things out of harmony with love and act in anger about a lot of things. Act in anger whenever your pain is triggered. And interestingly enough, God's law of attraction is wanting to trigger that pain every single moment it's there. So it's sort of like, if you think about it, it's like, this is what God's law is doing. It's like Mary has pain right there in the shoulder and God's law is going, pushing the exact area where the pain is.
I get a bit confused with this because I feel like a question that was asked earlier, I've got a dynamic where I feel blame, a lot of that, and I get a lot of people blaming me. So then I have a resistance to, I wonder whether I'm definitely avoiding pain, I know that, but then I'm kind of feeling like, it's not fair that someone's blaming me. So then I get quite resistive and rebellious about going into because the pain that I'm feeling underneath that is pretty severe.
Yeah, but it's ant stuff.
It's you just using anger to feel powerful over your pain.
Okay.
The pain might be severe. Like I've had much severe pain in my life. The pain might be severe, but in the end, it's temporary if you let it go. The only time it's not temporary is if you store it, and then it guides the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So there's some fundamental spiritual beliefs about pain that you need to accept.
Okay.
One of the fundamental beliefs is if you let it go, it's better than keeping it in. That's a fundamental spiritual belief that almost everybody on the planet doesn't agree with.
See, I thought I had that feeling because I feel like I've done a chunk where I've learnt that, but obviously not.
No.
Okay.
No, there's the intellectual acknowledgement that may be true, but no emotional shift.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
And this is the trouble with the change of pleasure as well. Remember, I said there's an intellectual acknowledgement and you've actually used control to change the pleasure, but actually not a lot of emotional shift yet. See, a lot of this was driven by the avoidance of this in your past, right?
Uh-huh.
And you haven't dealt with the pain that drove it. So this is why, there's a spiritual belief that's faulty, which is humility doesn't work.
Okay.
It's really the spiritual belief.
Right.
Right, which is a false belief. Humility does work, is the... And in fact, as I said to you yesterday, humility is a large part of God's way. Very large part of God's way. If you can learn how to be humble, you can learn a lot of things from being humble, including absorb truths from God and also receive love from people and from God because you're humble. But humility is a spiritual belief that needs to be in my heart and not just in my head, not just in my thoughts. Sure. It has to turn into a feeling that I love humility because it works and it's good for me and it's good for everybody.
Yeah, you're right. I don't feel that yet.
Yeah.
I feel like I love truth, but not humility.
Correct. I agree with the statement that you love truth, but you don't love truth about humility.
Right, okay.
And remember I said at the beginning, you have to have faith in God's truth about
humility.
Humility.
Okay.
Yeah,
right, dude.
And you don't have that.
Cool.
So I agree you love some truth, but not the truth about humility.
No, because I can get quite self-righteous and angry about truth at times, and I can weaponize it and be quite whatever, and I see that is really unloving and can really be off-putting for people with truth, and I'm very aware of I don't want to be like that.
And this is one way a lot of people damage divine truth.
Right, yeah.
By hearing the God's truth and then weaponizing it.
And it sounds like a religion then, and it's not.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And it's because of a lack of humility. You see, unless you make that fundamental change, and remember I said the change was have faith in God's truth about humility. And God's truth about humility is it's good for you.
Right.
It's great for you. It's great for everybody. It's a great way to solve the world's problems, actually.
Yeah.
Because if all of us own our own pain and take responsibility for our own pain, then I'm not going to visit my pain on you. and you won't visit your pain on me. Isn't that wonderful? It means that I'm only responsible for my own, and I'm not bearing the consequence of yours, because you're responsible for yours, and you're not bearing the consequence of mine because I'm responsible for mine, right? This is very fair, that I should be responsible for my pain and you should be responsible for yours. And having faith in God's truth about humility is going to get you over these problems of selfishness.
Okay.
As well.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, because the more humble you become, the more you become equal with others. And you go, Emma's pain is just as important for me to avoid creating Emma's pain as it is for me to avoid to feel and release my own pain so I don't create any more pain for me. It's just as important for me to do it for Emma as it is for me to do it for me. And so I'm no longer selfish because I have, remember, you could say the antidote to selfishness is equality, right? Isn't it? I'm interested in your pleasure as much as mine. I'm interested in being responsible for my pain so I don't visit on you. I don't want to cause you extra pain.
And that's equality is one of the spiritual principles.
It's a principle of love, one of the primary ones about love, equality, right? So you can see I've got faith, a spiritual quality. I need faith in God's truth, another spiritual quality. That my emotions, going through being humble to my emotions, works. Humble, another spiritual quality.
Part of self-responsibility.
And I'm self-responsible, another spiritual quality. I'm self-responsible for my own pain. So it's one thing to say, Mum and Dad caused it. It's another thing to go, well, it's too bad now. Mum and Dad caused it. It's in me now and I'm carrying it. Do you want it in you or out of you? It makes a lot of sense to go, I want it out of me.
Stuck on that.
Yeah. So of course it makes sense that humility is the key to that, right? So spiritual quality, humility. And then I've got self-responsibility, as Mary pointed out, spiritual quality, great spiritual quality to develop. So you can see how many spiritual qualities are involved in the problem. And you think about the rest of our day today so far, pretty much everything we've discussed, a spiritual quality was involved in the problem. Lack of self-love, lack of truth, lack of humility, lack of faith, all spiritual qualities involved in the problem. And this is why I've said from yesterday, remember, I want to focus you on the spiritual qualities, the spiritual principles, because once you start grasping them, they will give you great motivation to change. Once you get them in your heart, there'll be great motivation to change. Make sense?
Yes.
So all of your self-reflection, great. Right? Conscience bothering you, great. This is a good thing. Dealing with the spiritual quality of humility to feel your pain needs to be done emotionally.
Yeah.
I need to get to the point where I feel it's good for me to do that.
Yeah, you're right. I don't feel that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can feel that within myself now.
Yeah, yeah. If I don't feel that, I'm going to feel avoid it. And if as soon as I feel avoid it, there's all sorts of ways that I would choose to avoid it.
And then I justify it on top of that.
And you'll
I'm not
justify every one of them.
self-responsible,
So let's justify going to footy today. Let's justify, and watch people clash with each other all day competitively. Like, it'd be different if it was a game that everybody, surely there's games we could make that are not all competitive all the time. Like, I can think of how to turn almost every game into a joy, including football, soccer, we call it in Australia.
Yeah.
Including that, you could almost turn every game into a joy. But of course, while everybody's avoiding their pain, it's going to be pretty hard because nobody will like it. Because they want the competition and they want somebody, in gridiron, want somebody bashing somebody else up occasionally, because that's what you feel about doing with your dad, right? And so it's like, I want that to happen on the field too. And I get involved in that. And I want there to be frustration in a game. So this is why soccer is very attractive, particularly to Europeans, because you have a frustrating life, to be honest. Like there's a lot of frustrations in your day-to-day life. Space frustrations, control frustrations, law frustrations. There's all these different frustrations that then go, I want to exorcise this demon of frustration in me by having a game that's frustrating, right? So I can watch a frustrating game and I can focus all of my pain on that rather than actually feel all the frustration of my life.
Yeah.
Men are very prone to this, right?
Yeah.
And so it's mostly men, of course, that are attracted to these kind of things. And it's all to do with the avoidance of pain, which is all to do with the spiritual principle of I don't yet get what humility is. I don't understand it yet. So the way to fix that is be honest with yourself and go, I don't get it yet. Do I want to get it? You know, obviously, to get it, you're going to have to want to get it first. And then it's like, pray to God for more love. Pray to God to understand why humility is good. Pray to God about getting why it's such a good thing for your life and also for everybody else's life. And the more you do that, the more inspiration you'll receive, the more direction from your guide you'll receive, the more experience in life you'll get, and you'll go, oh yeah, I see there's that person avoiding humility and look what happened there, and there's that person over there avoiding humility and look at the bad thing they did, and oh, here's me avoiding humility and look what I went and did, you know? And then you go, oh, if I was just more humble, that problem wouldn't exist, right? And then in your heart, you'll start feeling humility, really good for everybody, right? Including me. So most of us, we think humility good for everyone else.
Yeah.
Truth good for everyone else. Faith good, everyone else. Love good, oh yeah, you all should love me. Thank you. But we don't think it's the rules apply to me. Yeah. And mostly because of pain. The avoidance of pain and our fear of pain is causing almost every single problem that exists on earth right at this moment.
So I imagine the emotional terror is a big driver of that as well.
That's right. Terror of emotion, afraid to feel emotion, afraid to look funny feeling emotion, afraid to show emotion to anybody, afraid to, not have control of emotion, afraid that if you have emotion that you'll do something wild or stupid or bad or so dark that you end up in jail. There's so much terror of emotion. Of course, any of those things might happen if you try to avoid your emotion, and they do happen all the time. But when you truly desire to feel your emotion, none of those things will happen. Even for many of you guys, you've been involved in avoiding emotion through taking of drugs and all these other things, which also can cause things like schizophrenia and psychotic episodes and all sorts of other things. None of those things will happen either because you can handle yourself.
Yeah, I get a lot of those types of psychotic episodes or whatever from cannabis or whatever it's been.
Yep. And you won't feel drawn to any drug as a result because you can handle yourself. You can deal with all your feelings, and also as you deal with them and release them, you'll be happier anyway and you'll have less of them. You'll have less unhappiness and unhappy emotions.
And then I'll be motivated probably more to keep obeying the law.
That's right. And you'll also be motivated to seek pleasure, but not at any cost, and you'll seek pleasure for everybody. You won't just want to create your own pleasure, you want to create pleasure for other people. So, you'll start taking actions in your life, doing work in your life that actually benefits other people, not just you.
Yeah.
You'll do all of that as well. It'll be a natural consequence if you do this. And that's the beauty of God's truth, is that God wants us to enjoy our life, but not at the sacrifice of others. And not at the sacrifice of the environment, which is going on terribly at the moment in all society. Not at the sacrifice of dealing with your feelings. Not at the sacrifice of other people's feelings. He wants you to have pleasure, but in a loving manner is the criteria, is the law's demand, And if you can see that and you start feeling that, then you even feel it so much that that's what you want to do, then of course your life will change and the people around you will change. And also, a lot more people will like you as well. And eventually, they might not like you right at the beginning, but they'll like you eventually because they'll be motivated. You know, like I've been attacked over and over again for, you know, lots and lots of years, but a lot of people who attack me have a grudging respect. Because I've been consistent the whole time, been loving with them the whole time. And so they have a grudging respect of it as well. Do you know what I mean? So even if they don't like me very much, they still respect me to a degree.
Yeah.
Yeah. And because I do practice what I preach, and I also, however I continually help others without requiring anything in return.
And I imagine you respect yourself as well in that place.
Of course. Yeah. Of course. I know that I'm doing the right thing. God's telling me I'm doing the right thing. God's happy with me. That's all I need.
Okay.
Yeah. That's all I need to know, is that he's happy because I'm following his principles, but also because he's happy that I'm happy.
Yeah. Thanks very much, both of you. That was very helpful.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's the end of our day today. Hopefully you've learnt something from today. Yep. Thanks, guys. Thank you. Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Shall we talk about tomorrow a little bit before we go? So what we're thinking tomorrow is probably from about 10 to midday. We'll probably do channeling. We'll do some mediumship, talking to some spirits who have been here. We want to help them as much as we would like to help you, so that's what we'll do tomorrow. And after lunch, we'll have probably lunch about midday. And then about 12:30 or something, we're thinking for about an hour before we leave or something like that, and depends a bit on your questions. We just would like to discuss our plans a bit with you, if that's all right. And as long as you're interested in that. And if you don't want to know what our plans are, do all of you want to know our plans, or just some of you? Because you can leave if you don't want to know. That's all good.
Some of you heard it last time.
Some of you heard some things last week. Of course, every discussion we have, we usually share different things. If you don't want to be there for that, then feel free to leave. Just to mention one thing we haven't mentioned, and we keep forgetting to mention everywhere we go. If you want to donate to our effort, they're on our website. It's just donate.divinetruth.com.
And I know some of you have already donated.
Some of you have already done that, so thank you very much for that. Our expenses here are basically our accommodation and our food and travel here, obviously, and also this hall, which was, I think, about £700 or something like that for the 3 days.
660.
Yeah, something like that. Remember too, if we get an excess of donation, one of the things we want to do first is start helping the guys who bought the speakers, so we can pay those speakers off a bit, and that would mean then that those speakers can be used in every event we do in England and Ireland. We're thinking is probably where they might go, and they might even go into Europe occasionally as well. So that's what we're thinking with those. If you want to donate here, you'll notice that we did bring today a red box out the front. We forgot to bring it yesterday, but out the front on the
just
desk.
Where you would have picked up your name tags.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So you see a little red box that has very poor writing on it saying donations or whatever. You can donate if you want to donate some cash there. If you don't want to donate cash, that's fine. This is the best place to do that. Aside from that, I think those of you who don't want to be here tomorrow, that's fine. If you're not interested in mediumship, that's fine. But I think usually we find that most people benefit from our discussions with spirits as well as our discussions with them personally. So my suggestion is pop along if you want to, but you're not bound to. It's just something we wanted to do tomorrow.
Yeah. If you're not coming tomorrow, it's been lovely to have you here and lovely to have your participation.
Yeah.
Especially those who've, put your hands up and asked some questions. It's really good.
Yeah.
I know we didn't get to everyone's question today, but hopefully you got a lot from the ones that we did get to.
Yeah. We feel today and yesterday were quite good open-wise. You guys felt because we confronted truth right from the beginning and focused on principles right from the beginning, we felt the spirit here was quite good. At least there was an open spirit to hearing and listening for the most part, and that's really good. And I hope that as a result of that, it benefits you in your daily life is the real key. And that's going to depend a lot, isn't it, upon your personal application of what you've learned. Yeah. So we'd encourage you to focus on the principles, focus on receiving some love, but focus on living in harmony with the love you receive by focusing on the principles as well in your life. Yeah.
After this, we'll be in Ireland for next weekend. We're in Ireland, and then we're off to Canada.
Yeah.
So off to North America.
Yeah.
There's no spaces in Ireland at this point, although we do have late cancellations everywhere we go. So if you do want to join us,
I think we had
Ireland,
about 20 people not even come here.
We did.
We frequently have a large proportion of people not come who book, and it's something we need to have some talks about with groups of people, because it is a very unloving thing because it stops other people from coming.
Yeah.
Sorry. Here it wasn't so bad because we did have extra room.
Yep, it was a bigger venue, but in Ireland, for example, we're limited to 50, and when there's 50 people booked but only 30 come, that's quite a disadvantage because there's waiting lists on every full event. So, yeah. So we know you guys are not the people who didn't come because we're looking at you, but just for the purpose of the recording and so on, it is a large issue of love when you take a spot at a free event just because it's free and you can book in, and then don't show up because it prevents other people from being able to sit in your seat.
Yeah. Remember, the events are not free for us.
No.
We pay for your seat, we pay for hiring the hall and all those other things. And also other people, when you rock up, when you made a booking and you don't come, you're actually treating the donations of others with a lot of disrespect. Can you see that? It's like they've paid for the venue and everything, and by not coming and not respecting the fact and not, cancelling way before the event and preventing others from coming, you're also being unloving to the people who donate towards the event as well. So there's a lot of areas of love that we need to talk about with regard to that. And one day, maybe over the course of these events, we might raise that issue in a more detailed fashion. Yeah. Remember we raised it a bit last week, didn't we? Yeah, for those of you that were there, and illustrated sort of through that one of the physical ways in which we can be so unloving at times. Yeah. Good day. Well, we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. We're looking forward to talking to our street friends.
See you guys.
And 10
o'clock tomorrow, not 11
not
as
11,
advertised.
10.
So 10.
10.